Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1. I was dusting the shelves when my knuckle brushed against a soft click. I paused, lined in, and felt around the paneling. There it was, a small, rubbery switch tucked behind the molding. I pressed it. A seam appeared in the wall I'd never noticed before, thin, vertical. I pulled, and a panel popped open, revealing a narrow cavity between the walls. Inside, neatly stacked, were 6 cassette tapes. No labels, just numbers etched into the plastic in black ink. The first one was already halfway rewound. The house had been in the family for decades. My aunt lived here alone after her husband passed, and when she died, I inherited it along with all her belongings. I'd been cleaning for weeks, sorting through boxes of old photographs and documents, trying to decide what to keep and what to discard. The living room had always felt strange to me, even as a child. The wood paneling seemed too thick, the proportions slightly off. Now I understood why. I carried the first tape to the old stereo system my aunt had kept in the corner. The machine was ancient but functional. I slipped the cassette in and pressed play. Static filled the room, then a man's voice emerged, calm and measured. Recording number 1, the subject arrived at the agreed location. She seemed nervous, kept checking her watch. I maintained distance as instructed. No direct contact yet. My hands went cold. The voice wasn't familiar, but something about the tone made my skin prickle. The recording continued for several minutes, describing movements, observations, behavioral patterns, clinical, detached, like a surveillance report. I ejected the tape and examined it more closely. The plastic casing was worn smooth from handling. The number 1 had been carved deep into the surface with something sharp. I reached for the second tape. Recording number 2, first contact established. She was resistant initially, but curiosity won. Asked questions about the arrangement. I provided minimal information as agreed. She accepted the terms. My aunt's voice cut through the static suddenly, making me jump. Clear and unmistakable. I need to know more about what you're asking me to do. This feels wrong. The man's response was patient, almost paternal. Nothing you do will harm anyone directly. You're simply observing and reporting. Think of it as a neighborhood watch, but more focused. I stopped the tape. My aunt had been involved in something she clearly had reservations about. The recordings were evidence of meetings, conversations, some kind of arrangement that made her uncomfortable. I looked around the room with new eyes. Had these meetings happened here, in this house? The third tape contained longer conversations. My aunt's voice grew more confident, more willing to participate in whatever scheme was unfolding. She provided detailed descriptions of people's routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. Names were never mentioned, only locations and patterns of behavior. The woman with the blue car leaves every Tuesday and Friday afternoon. Always carries a large bag, parks in the same spot, never locks her doors. The elderly man takes his medication at the same time each day. Keeps the pills in a dish by the kitchen window. You can see it from the street. I felt sick. My aunt, who had always seemed so kind and proper, had been surveilling her neighbors. But for whom and why? The fourth tape revealed more. The man's voice became more demanding, more specific in his requests. He wanted detailed floor plans, information about security systems, schedules of when people would be away from their homes. My aunt's responses grew shorter, more reluctant. "I don't like where this is going," she said during one exchange. "People could get hurt." "People get hurt every day," the man replied. "This is simply business. You agreed to help, and we've compensated you well for your time." Compensated, I thought about the mysterious deposits I'd found in my aunt's bank statements while settling her estate. Small amounts, irregular timing, no clear source. I'd assumed they were from odd jobs or selling household items. Now I understood they were payments for surveillance. The fifth tape was different. The quality was poor, recorded from a distance. My aunt's voice was strained, frightened. "I want out. I don't want to be part of this anymore. What happened to the woman with the blue car? That wasn't supposed to happen. What happened was unfortunate but necessary. She saw too much, asked too many questions. These things happen when people don't mind their own business." "You killed her. You actually killed her." "I solved a problem, just like you've been helping me solve problems. Don't act surprised now. You knew what this was from the beginning." I had to stop the recording. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the button. My sweet, gentle aunt had been involved in murder, or at least she provided information that led to someone's death. The woman with the blue car. I tried to remember if my aunt had ever mentioned anything about a neighbor who had died unexpectedly. The sixth and final tape was the shortest, just my aunt's voice speaking directly into the recorder. "If something happens to me, if I have an accident or get sick suddenly, these recordings prove I was forced into this. I tried to stop, but he won't let me. He says I know too much now. I'm scared. I've hidden these tapes where he'll never find them. Maybe someday someone will understand what really happened here." The tape ended with a soft click. I sat in the silence of the living room, surrounded by my aunt's belongings, trying to process what I'd learned. She hadn't been a willing participant in the end. She'd been trapped, coerced, threatened into continuing her surveillance activities. But who was the man, and what had really happened to my aunt? I remembered the circumstances of her death, a fall down the stairs in the middle of the night. The coroner ruled it accidental. She'd been having dizzy spells, problems with her balance. It seemed plausible at the time, natural, even expected for someone her age living alone. Now I wondered if her death had been as accidental as it appeared. I gathered the tapes and put them back in their hiding place. The wall panel clicked shut, seamless once again. I finished dusting the shelves, but my movements were mechanical, automatic. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversations I'd heard, trying to piece together the timeline of events. That night I lay in my aunt's bed, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the house made me tense. Had the man known about the recordings? Was he still out there somewhere, wondering if my aunt had left evidence behind? I thought about going to the police, but what would I tell them? The recordings were years old. The voices were unidentified except for my aunt's. There was no concrete evidence of any specific crime, just vague references to surveillance and one woman's death that may or may not have been connected. The next morning I walked through the neighborhood looking at the houses with new eyes. Behind any of these windows, someone might have been watching, recording, reporting to an unknown handler. The woman with the blue car was gone, but others remained. Were they safe? Did they know they'd been observed? I never found out who the man was. I never learned the full extent of my aunt's involvement in whatever network of surveillance and violence she'd stumbled into. The recordings raised more questions than they answered, and some truths are too dangerous to pursue. I sold the house and moved away, but I kept the tapes. Sometimes I wonder if I should have destroyed them. erased the evidence of my aunt's final desperate attempt to tell her story. But they're all that remains of her voice now, her confession, her fear, her regret. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I remember the weight of those cassettes in my hands, the careful way someone had numbered them, expecting them to be found someday. My aunt's voice growing smaller and more frightened with each recording. I think about the woman with the blue car, and I wonder if anyone else knows what really happened to her. I wonder if anyone else is listening to recordings hidden in the walls of houses, discovering that the people they loved were not who they seemed to be. The truth is sometimes we never really know the people closest to us. We see what they want us to see, hear what they want us to hear. The rest remains hidden behind walls, waiting for an accidental touch, a curious hand, a moment when the surface gives way to reveal the darkness underneath. My aunt is gone now, and her secrets died with her, but the man's voice remains, calm and patient and utterly without conscience. Somewhere out there, he might still be recruiting watchers, building networks of surveillance, solving problems in ways that leave no obvious trace. I dust my own shelves carefully now, checking for switches I might have missed, panels that don't quite fit right. Because once you know that walls can hide terrible things, you never stop looking for the seams. Crime 2, it took a second to register. I unlocked the door and looked down, same steps, same threshold, but the doormat had changed. Mine was faded and frayed at the corners. This one was new, clean, a darker shade. When I flipped it over, the underside was damp, and stuck to it was a torn receipt with only one word printed on it, returned. I went inside and checked the closet. My old mat was gone, and the shoes by the door weren't mine. I stood there holding those foreign shoes, black sneakers, size 10. I wear size 8.5. The fabric inside was still warm, as if someone had just slipped them off. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to think logically. Maybe the landlord had been here, maybe maintenance, but they would have called first. I walked through each room, searching for other signs of intrusion. Everything seemed untouched until I reached the kitchen. The coffee mug on the counter wasn't the one I'd left that morning. This one had lipstick stains on the rim, deep red, almost burgundy. I don't wear lipstick. The refrigerator hummed louder than usual. When I opened it, a container of leftover soup sat on the top shelf. I hadn't made soup in weeks. The smell hit me when I lifted the lid, tomato and basil, but underneath something else. Something metallic that made my stomach turn. I called the property management office. The woman on the phone sounded distracted, papers rustling in the background. No one had been authorized to enter my apartment. No maintenance requests, no inspections. She asked if I wanted to file a report, but something in her tone suggested she'd heard this before. That evening I sat by the window watching the parking lot. Around dusk, a woman approached my building. She had dark hair and wore a red coat that seemed familiar. She looked up at my window, and for a moment our eyes met. She didn't look surprised to see me there. Instead, she smiled, not friendly, but knowing. Then she walked away. I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the building seemed amplified. Footsteps in the hallway, doors closing, water running through pipes in the walls. I kept thinking about that receipt fragment. Returned from where? Returned by whom? The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. The paper was expensive, cream-colored, with a watermark I couldn't quite make out. The handwriting was precise, almost mechanical. You have something that belongs to me. I examined the note under the kitchen light. The ink was still slightly wet. Whoever had written it might still be in the building. I checked the hallway, but it was empty. The carpet showed indentations where someone had stood outside my door for a considerable period. I decided to visit the previous tenant. The landlord had mentioned she'd moved suddenly. leaving some belongings behind. Her forwarding address led me to a small apartment across town. The building smelled of old carpet and cooking oil. She answered the door on the third knock, the woman from the parking lot. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly when she spoke. She invited me in without asking who I was or why I'd come. Her apartment was nearly empty except for boxes stacked against the walls. She offered me tea from a chipped mug and sat across from me on a folding chair. When I mentioned the doormat, her expression changed. I had to leave quickly, she said, stirring honey into her tea with a plastic spoon. There were complications with my lace. I asked about the shoes, the coffee mug, the soup in my refrigerator. She listened without interrupting, nodding as if she recognized each detail. When I finished, she walked to one of the boxes and pulled out a photograph. It showed her standing in front of my apartment door, but the photograph was old, faded. She looked younger, happier. The doormat in the picture was the new one I'd found, the clean, dark one. I lived there for 3 years, she said, holding the photograph. Before you moved in, before they told me I had to leave. She explained that she'd been forced out due to a clerical error with her lease. The management company had double booked the apartment. She'd packed quickly, leaving behind items she couldn't carry. When she tried to retrieve them later, she was told the new tenant had already moved in. I asked why she hadn't contacted me directly. She set down her tea and looked out the window. I tried. I knocked several times. I left notes, but you were never there. The problem was I work from home. I'm almost always there. She walked me to the door, and as I was leaving, she handed me a key. Brass, slightly tarnished, with a number scratched into the metal. This opens a storage unit, she said. Building's basement, unit 12. My landlord said they'd moved my things there. I drove back to my building, the key warm in my palm. The basement was dim, lit by fluorescent bulbs that flickered intermittently. Unit 12 was at the end of the hallway, behind a metal door that looked like it hadn't been opened recently. The key turned easily. Inside, I found boxes of clothes, books, kitchen items, personal photographs, a college diploma with her name, but at the back of the unit, wrapped in a plastic tarp, was my old doormat, the faded, frayed one I thought had been thrown away. Underneath the mat was a manila envelope. Inside, copies of lease agreements, all signed with my name, but in handwriting I didn't recognize. Rental applications with my personal information but someone else's employment history. Bank statements from accounts I'd never opened. The documents painted a picture of a life that was mine but wasn't mine. Someone had been using my identity to live in my apartment before I'd ever heard of the place. Someone who knew my social security number, my mother's maiden name, my employment history well enough to forge convincing paperwork. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit, surrounded by another person's life, holding documents that proved I existed in ways I'd never existed. The fluorescent light above me buzzed and flickered, casting shifting shadows on the walls. When I finally went back upstairs, my apartment felt different. The shoes by the door seemed to watch me. The coffee mug in the kitchen had been moved to the other side of the counter. The soup in the refrigerator was gone, but there was a new container in its place. Chicken noodle this time. I called the police, but the officer who responded seemed skeptical. Identity theft cases were complex, he explained. Without proof of financial loss or criminal intent, there wasn't much they could do. He suggested I change my locks and contact the credit bureaus. But changing locks wouldn't solve the real problem. Someone had been living my life before I knew I was living it. Someone who knew where I worked, what I ate, how I arranged my furniture. Someone who had enough access to my personal information to become me on paper. The woman in the red coat never answered her door again. When I went back to her apartment building, the landlord said she'd moved out that same evening. No forwarding address this time. The apartment was empty except for the folding chair and the chipped mug she'd served me tea in. I still live in the same apartment. I've changed the locks twice, installed a security camera, spoken with neighbors who claim they never saw anyone matching her description. But sometimes when I come home from running errands, small things are different. A book moved from one shelf to another. A window open that I remember closing. Food in the refrigerator that I don't remember buying. The doormat is the same one I found that first day. The clean, dark one with returned on the receipt underneath. I've never replaced it. Somehow it feels like it belongs there now, even though I know it was never really mine. Last week I found another note under my door. Same cream-colored paper, same precise handwriting. Thank you for taking care of everything while I was away. I don't know if she's coming back or if she ever really left. I don't know how many other versions of my life exist in filing cabinets and storage units around the city. But I've learned to listen more carefully to the sounds in the hallway, to pay attention to which coffee mug I use in the morning, to check the temperature of my shoes before I put them on. Because somewhere out there, someone else is living a life that looks exactly like mine. And sometimes, late at night, when the building settles and the pipes whisper through the walls, I wonder if the life I'm living now is really mine at all. Crime 3, I never use bookmarks. I either finish a chapter or stop mid-sentence, but I never mark pages. That's why it caught my eye, an envelope sticking out of a book on the third shelf, wedged halfway through a novel I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it out. The page it marked had a single sentence underlined in pencil, not a full sentence, just the word below. I flipped the envelope over. It was empty, but the glue seal had been sliced clean. The book was one of those paperbacks you buy at airport terminals, the kind with worn edges and a cracked spine that splits when you open it too wide. I remembered buying it during a business trip, reading maybe 50 pages before forgetting about it entirely. But someone had been inside it. Someone had marked that page deliberately. I held the envelope up to the light streaming through my living room window. The paper was standard white, nothing distinctive about the weight or texture. But as I turned it, I noticed something else. Faint impressions on the back surface, like someone had written on another piece of paper while this envelope lay underneath. I grabbed a pencil and lightly shaded over the impressions, watching letters emerge like a photograph developing in reverse. 3 words appeared, "She knows now." My hands started trembling, not the dramatic shake you see in movies, but that subtle vibration that happens when your nervous system quietly acknowledges something your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. I set the envelope on my coffee table and stared at it, as if looking long enough might make it explain itself. The house felt different suddenly, not haunted or supernatural, just wrong in the way familiar spaces can become when you realize someone else has been there without permission. I walked through each room, checking windows, testing door locks, searching for other signs of intrusion. Everything appeared normal, but normal felt like a performance now, like someone had carefully restored order after disturbing it. In my bedroom, I opened the drawer where I keep important documents. Birth certificate, passport, insurance papers, all exactly where they should be. But the rubber band holding them together was twisted differently than I remembered. Small detail, probably meaningless, but it joined the growing collection of almost certainties accumulating in my chest. I called my sister. She lived across town and had a spare key for emergencies. When she answered, her voice carried that particular strain people get when they're trying to sound casual about something that isn't. "Did you come by the house recently?" I asked. Long pause, too long. Why would you ask that? Just answer the question. "No, I haven't been there in weeks. Is something wrong?" I described the envelope, the marked page, the feeling that someone had been inside my home. As I spoke, I heard her breathing change, becoming more deliberate, like she was choosing each exhale carefully. "Maybe you marked the page yourself and forgot," she suggested, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it either. "I don't forget things like that." Another pause, then, "There's something I should probably tell you about the woman who used to live there before you bought the place." I had owned the house for 3 years. The previous owner was an elderly man who moved to a retirement community after his wife died. At least, that's what the real estate agent told me. Simple transaction, no complications, nothing unusual in the disclosure documents. "What woman?" "The man's daughter. She lived there with him during the last year before he moved. The neighbors mentioned her when I was jogging through your area last month. Said she was asking questions about who bought the house, what kind of person you were." The room seemed to contract around me. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed against my ear, trying to process information that should have been routine, but felt like evidence in a case I didn't know I was part of. "What kind of questions?" "Whether you lived alone, whether you had visitors, whether you seemed like someone who paid attention to details." That last part lodged in my throat like a bone. I thought about the envelope, the careful way it had been placed, the precision of the underlined word. Someone had wanted me to find it. Someone who knew I would notice something out of place in my own home. I asked my sister to come over. While I waited, I returned to the book and examined the marked page more carefully. The underlined word below appeared in the middle of a paragraph describing a character searching through old documents in a basement. I flipped through the rest of the book, looking for other markings, but found nothing. The basement, I hadn't spent much time down there since moving in. Just storage space, concrete walls, exposed beams, the usual collection of cardboard boxes and forgotten furniture from previous lives. I grabbed a flashlight and descended the narrow wooden stairs, each step announcing my presence with a creak that seemed too loud in the enclosed space. Most of the basement looked exactly as I remembered it. Dust patterns undisturbed, boxes stacked in the same configurations. But in the far corner, behind an old filing cabinet, I noticed something that definitely hadn't been there before. A small pile of papers, neatly arranged, weighted down with a smooth river stone. The papers were photocopies of newspaper articles, all from the same local publication, all from the same week 3 years ago. The headlines focused on a missing person case. A woman in her 30s had disappeared after telling friends she was going to visit her father. Her car was found in a shopping center parking lot, keys still in the ignition, purse untouched on the passenger seat. The investigation had concluded she left voluntarily, possibly to escape personal problems, but her family insisted something terrible had happened. I read each article twice, then spread them across the basement floor like puzzle pieces. The missing woman's name had been redacted with black marker, but her description matched what I remembered about the daughter my sister had mentioned. Dark hair, average height, worked as a bookkeeper, known for being meticulous about details. The final article in the stack was different, not a news report, but a copy of a handwritten letter addressed to the police department. The handwriting was careful, feminine, with loops that suggested someone who had learned cursive properly and maintained the habit into adulthood. "I know what happened to her," the letter began. "I've been watching the house where she disappeared. The new owner doesn't know what he's living with. She never left. She's still there in the walls and the spaces between what people choose to see and what they choose to ignore. I have proof, but I need someone to understand the truth before I can show it. The evidence is hidden where she put it, where she thought it would be safe. Look below. Look where foundations meet earth. She documented everything before it happened." The letter wasn't signed, but at the bottom, someone had written a phone number in pencil. I memorized the digits, then climbed back upstairs to call it. The phone rang 6 times before connecting to a voicemail system. No greeting, just the standard automated message asking me to leave my name and number. I hung up without speaking, but immediately regretted the decision. Whoever had left those papers wanted contact. They had orchestrated this entire discovery, led me through each revelation like breadcrumbs in a story I was still learning to read. I called back. This time when the voicemail prompt sounded, I spoke clearly. "I found your papers. I found the letter. I want to understand what happened." 2 hours later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the number I had dialed. "You live in her house now," said a woman's voice. Older, tired, but steady. "You sleep in her room, cook in her kitchen, exist in the space where she should be. Do you ever feel like you're not alone there?" The question hit me like cold water. I had felt exactly that, especially recently, but I had attributed it to stress, to the normal adjustment period that comes with living alone in a space that holds other people's histories. "Who are you?" Someone who cared about her, someone who knows she didn't leave voluntarily. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to find her. She's in that house somewhere and she left evidence. She was smart, careful, suspicious of the people around her. When she realized she was in danger, she documented everything. You just have to know where to look." The conversation lasted 20 minutes. The woman, who never gave her name, explained that the missing person had suspected her father of financial crimes, possibly involving the sale of the house. She had been gathering evidence when she disappeared. The official investigation had focused on her personal life, her relationships, her mental health, but had ignored the possibility that someone might have wanted to silence her discoveries. "Why didn't you tell the police this?" "I did. They said I was a conspiracy theorist. Said missing adults have the right to disappear if they choose to. Said there wasn't enough evidence to investigate further." After the call ended, I walked through my house with new awareness. Every shadow seemed deliberate, every corner potentially significant. I had been living inside someone else's final investigation, sleeping above evidence I hadn't known existed. The next morning I began my own search, not the dramatic ransacking you see in movies, but methodical examination of spaces that might conceal something important. I checked behind loose baseboards, inside electrical boxes, beneath floorboards that sounded hollow when stepped on. In the master bedroom closet, I discovered a section of drywall that had been removed and replaced. The paint didn't quite match the surrounding area, and the screws holding it in place were newer than the ones throughout the rest of the house. Behind the panel, wrapped in plastic and sealed with tape, I found a manila folder containing bank statements, photographs, and handwritten notes. The documents painted a picture of systematic financial fraud. The elderly man who had sold me the house had been stealing from elderly neighbors, using his daughter's bookkeeping skills to hide the transactions. When she discovered the scope of the operation, she had begun documenting everything, preparing to turn him into authorities. The final entry in her notes was dated the same week she disappeared. He knows I know. Moving evidence to secure location tomorrow. If something happens to me, the truth is hidden where he'll never think to look. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by papers that proved a woman had been murdered in the space where I now lived, and realized I was probably the only person who would ever see this evidence. The woman who had called me was right. The missing person hadn't disappeared voluntarily. She had been silenced by someone who needed her secrets to stay buried. But I also realized something else. The woman on the phone knew too much about the layout of my house, too much about the missing person's habits, too much about where evidence might be hidden. Her voice had been older, tired, but familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. I looked at the handwritten notes again, comparing them to the letter I had found in the basement. The handwriting was different, but both showed the same careful attention to detail, the same methodical approach to documenting information. The woman on the phone wasn't just someone who cared about the missing person. She was someone who had been watching me, studying my habits, learning when I was home and when I wasn't. Someone who had access to my house and knew exactly how to lead me through this discovery. I called the number again. This time it rang once before connecting. "You found it," she said, without waiting for me to speak. "Who are you, really?" Long pause. When she spoke again, her voice carried a satisfaction that chilled me more than any threat could have. "I'm someone who needed the truth to come out, and now it has. You've seen the evidence. You know what happened. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The line went dead. I tried calling back, but the number was no longer in service. I still live in this house. I still sleep in that bedroom, still walk past the closet where I found the evidence of a woman's final investigation. I turned the documents over to police, but the elderly man had died 6 months after selling me the house. No one left to prosecute, no justice left to serve. Sometimes late at night I hear sounds in the walls, not supernatural sounds, just the normal settling of an old house, the expansion and contraction of wood and metal as temperatures change. But now I know this house holds secrets, and I wonder what else I haven't found yet. The woman who called me knew I would find that evidence. She knew exactly where it was hidden, exactly how to lead me to it. Which means she either helped hide it there or she knew the person who did. I never found out what happened to the missing woman. Her case remains officially unsolved, but I know she didn't disappear voluntarily, and I know someone wanted me to discover that truth. The question that keeps me awake is why? Why me? Why now? And who was really on the other end of that phone call? I still don't use bookmarks, but now every book in my house feels like it might be hiding something, every page potentially marked by someone else's secret. The truth is somewhere in the details I haven't noticed yet, in the spaces between what I choose to see and what I choose to ignore. And somewhere out there, someone is still watching, still waiting, still orchestrating discoveries I haven't made yet. Crime 4, I keep a bar of soap in the downstairs bathroom for guests. White, unscented, never used. But today when I went in to clean, it had been carved, letters scratched crudely into the side. Not with a knife, with a fingernail, just 5 letters, no word, no meaning, just a message that didn't belong. I ran my finger across the surface and felt the grooves, deep, intentional. I went to throw it away, but the trash bin was already full with more soap, all of it marked. I counted 12 bars, each one carved with the same 5 letters. The smell of lavender drifted up from the bin, though none of the soap was scented. Someone had been here, someone had time, someone had purpose. My house key still hung on its hook by the door. The windows were locked from the inside. The alarm system showed no breaches. Yet here I stood, staring at evidence that my home wasn't mine anymore. The bathroom mirror reflected my face, but behind me, carved into the wall above the towel rack, were those same 5 letters, fresh. The plaster dust still clung to the baseboard. I called my sister first. She had a spare key. Had she been by, her voice carried that edge it always held when she thought I was losing it again. No, she hadn't been over. Why would she carve soap? The question hung between us like a judgment. I hung up and dialed my neighbor instead. She remembered seeing someone at my back door yesterday morning. A woman with dark hair, she thought, or maybe it was a man. The distance made it hard to tell. They'd been there for a while, just standing. When she looked again, they were gone. She assumed it was me. People always assume. I walked through every room, checking for other signs. In the kitchen, the sugar bowl sat exactly where I'd left it, but when I lifted the lid, 5 letters were pressed into the surface. Not carved, pressed, like someone had dipped their finger in water and written in the granules before they dried. The same 5 letters that meant nothing to me but apparently meant everything to someone else. The filing cabinet in my study was locked, but the papers inside had been moved. I could tell because I'm careful about these things, always have been. The insurance documents were on top now instead of the tax returns. Someone had been looking for something specific. The carving on my desk was subtle, scratched into the underside where most people would never think to look. Those same 5 letters waiting for me to discover them. I started making a list of people who had access. The house cleaner, the repair technician who'd fixed the furnace last month, the postal worker who sometimes left packages inside when it rained. But as I wrote their names, I realized the problem wasn't who could get in. The problem was why they would want to. The photograph on my mantel had been turned slightly, just enough to catch my attention. It showed my family at a gathering from several years back. We were all smiling all together, all pretending everything was normal. I picked it up to straighten it and felt something on the back of the frame. More letters, not carved this time, but written in pencil so lightly I almost missed them. Sleep didn't come that night. Every sound in the house seemed amplified, the refrigerator humming, the floorboards settling, the wind against the windows. But underneath it all I heard something else, breathing, slow and steady and definitely not mine. I followed the sound to the basement door. It was coming from below. The basement was dark except for the small window near the ceiling. I clicked on the flashlight app on my phone and descended the stairs. Nothing seemed disturbed at first. The storage boxes were stacked the same way. The holiday decorations sat in their corners, but then I saw the wall. Someone had used their finger to write in the dust that coated the concrete. Not just the 5 letters this time, whole sentences. Messages that made my skin crawl and my hands shake. Messages about watching and waiting and knowing things they shouldn't know. Messages that referenced conversations I'd thought were private. Phone calls I'd made, places I'd been, people I'd spoken to. One message was different from the others. It was a question, and it was directed at me. It asked if I remembered what I'd done 3 summers ago, if I remembered the choice I'd made, if I remembered her. Her, the word hit me like a physical blow. I did remember her. The woman who'd worked at the insurance office, the one who'd processed my claim after the accident, the one who'd asked too many questions and made too many notes and finally stopped returning my calls, the one who'd looked at me with suspicion instead of sympathy, the one who'd made me feel like a criminal when I was supposed to be a victim. I drove to the insurance office the next morning. The woman at the front desk was new, young, efficient. She told me that her predecessor had left suddenly. No notice, no forwarding address, just cleaned out her desk and disappeared. The police had been asking questions, she said. Something about irregularities in old files, something about claims that didn't add up. My file was thick, thicker than I remembered. It contained copies of documents I'd never seen. Photographs of the accident scene taken from angles I didn't recognize. Witness statements that contradicted what I'd told them. Medical reports that raised questions I couldn't answer. And on the very last page, in handwriting I didn't recognize, those same 5 letters. The detective who'd worked my case was retired now, but he agreed to meet me at a diner downtown. He remembered the accident, remembered the questions that had never been answered. He slid a manila envelope across the table between us. Inside were photographs of the car after they'd pulled it from the ravine. The damage was worse than I remembered, much worse. The kind of damage that suggested speed, the kind of damage that suggested intent. He asked me about the woman from the insurance office, asked if I knew she'd been investigating my case unofficially, asked if I knew she discovered discrepancies in my story, asked if I knew she'd planned to reopen the investigation, asked if I knew she'd been scared in the weeks before she disappeared. I told him I didn't know any of those things, but my voice cracked when I said it, and he noticed. He always noticed. That's what made him good at his job. He leaned back in his booth and studied my face with eyes that had seen too much truth and too many lies. Then he told me something that made my blood freeze. The woman hadn't just disappeared. She'd been found in the woods behind her apartment building. The same 5 letters carved into the tree above where she'd been buried. The same 5 letters that had been appearing in my house. The same 5 letters that spelled out her name. I drove home in a daze. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was one I didn't want to see. Inside my house, new messages had appeared. This time they were on the mirrors, written in what looked like soap but smelled like fear. They told me the truth I'd been running from. They reminded me of what I'd done and why I'd done it and how I'd convinced myself it was necessary. The woman had been close to exposing me, too close. She'd figured out that the accident wasn't an accident, that the person in the passenger seat hadn't died from the impact, that the insurance money was built on a lie that was built on a murder. She'd known, and she'd been ready to tell the world. I sat in my living room as darkness fell, surrounded by evidence of my guilt written by my own hand. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? My conscience finally breaking through. My mind finally forcing me to confront what I'd done. The carved soap, the dusty messages, the mysterious appearances and disappearances. All of it was me. All of it was my guilt made manifest. But knowing the truth didn't make it easier to bear. It made it worse, because now I understood why the messages kept appearing. Why the reminders wouldn't stop, why her name was carved into everything I touched. She wasn't gone. She was here, in every surface that could hold a message, in every shadow that could hide a truth, in every moment of silence that could be filled with the sound of her voice asking me why. The phone rang as I sat there in the dark. The caller ID showed no number, no name, just a blank screen that somehow felt familiar. I answered because I had to, because I was tired of running from voices I couldn't escape. The line was quiet for a long moment, then through the static in the distance I heard it. 5 letters, spoken like a prayer, spoken like an accusation, spoken like a promise that this wasn't over, that it would never be over. That truth has a way of carving itself into everything, including the people who tried to bury it. I hung up and walked to the bathroom. The soap was there again, fresh, unmarked, waiting for me to leave my message, waiting for me to confess what I'd done, waiting for me to carve her name into something permanent so the world would know that some stains never wash clean. My finger traced the surface of the soap, feeling its smooth resistance. Behind me, the mirror reflected a face I barely recognized, the face of someone who'd learned that guilt doesn't disappear just because you hide it. It just finds new ways to surface, new ways to spell out the truth, new ways to remind you that some voices never stop speaking, even after you silence them forever. Crime 5, I always take the garbage out before I leave. Routine. But when I came back, the bin in the kitchen was full again, not just full, organized. Paper bags folded, containers rinsed. A plastic fork laid carefully on top of a crumpled napkin. I didn't recognize any of it. I checked the fridge. The leftovers were untouched, but someone had taken the time to cut every label off the packaging, neatly, like they didn't want to be identified. The silence in my apartment felt different that afternoon, heavier, the kind of quiet that makes you notice your own breathing. I stood there, staring at the trash, feeling my pulse quicken. The logical part of my mind searched for explanations. Maybe I forgot taking out a second bag. Maybe my neighbor accidentally used my bin. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I pulled out my phone and called the landlord. His voice was tired, distracted. He assured me that only maintenance had been scheduled and they'd finished their work 3 days ago. No one else had access. The building's security system had been installed just last month after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. I asked about the footage. He said he'd check, but his tone suggested he thought I was being paranoid. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I found myself checking the locks repeatedly, peering through the blinds at the street below. Everything looked normal. Cars parked in their usual spots, streetlights casting familiar shadows. But normal felt like a mask now, hiding something I couldn't quite grasp. The next morning, I examined the trash more carefully. The containers were from a restaurant I'd never been to, upscale place across town. The plastic bags were a brand I didn't recognize, thicker than what I usually bought. Someone had eaten well, then brought their garbage to my kitchen. But why and how? I decided to visit the restaurant. The hostess was friendly, professional. When I described the containers, she nodded with recognition. They'd had a large takeout order 2 nights ago. A woman, she said, paid in cash. Nervous, kept looking over her shoulder. The hostess remembered because the woman had asked specifically for extra bags, extra napkins, like she was planning to eat somewhere without proper facilities. The description she gave me was vague but familiar. Medium height, dark hair, wearing a blue jacket. It could have been anyone. It could have been the woman I'd seen in my building's lobby a few weeks ago, the one who'd been arguing quietly on her phone. I'd noticed her because she'd stayed there for a long time after the call ended, just sitting, staring at nothing. I returned home with more questions than answers. The building manager had reviewed the security footage. Nothing unusual, he said, but his eyes avoided mine when he spoke. He mentioned that the cameras had experienced some technical difficulties recently. Gaps in the recording. Convenient gaps, I thought, but didn't say it out loud. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the carefully arranged trash, the missing labels, the woman in the lobby. I got up and checked my apartment again, looking for other signs of intrusion. In the bathroom, I noticed that my medicine cabinet was slightly ajar. I never left it open. Inside, a prescription bottle had been moved. The pills were still there, but the label had been peeled off partially, as if someone had been trying to read it in poor light. The pieces started forming a picture I didn't want to see. Someone had been in my apartment, not to steal, but to learn, to understand my routines, my habits, my vulnerabilities. The trash wasn't random. It was a message, or maybe a test. A way of saying they could enter my space whenever they wanted, leave traces of their presence without consequence. I called the police. The officer who came was polite but skeptical. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen, no direct threats. He took notes, promised to file a report, but I could see he thought I was overreacting. Maybe I was. Maybe the stress of recent events had made me paranoid, but the feeling in my stomach said otherwise. Over the following days, I noticed other small changes. A book moved slightly on my shelf. A kitchen towel folded differently than I remembered. The temperature in my apartment seemed colder, as if windows had been opened and closed while I was away. I started taking pictures of everything before I left, comparing them when I returned. The differences were subtle but real. I began researching cases of stalking, home invasion, psychological harassment. The internet was full of stories like mine. People who felt watched, followed, invaded, but couldn't prove it. Some found resolution. Others simply moved away, started over somewhere else. A few stopped posting altogether, and I wondered what had happened to them. The woman in the blue jacket appeared again. This time I saw her from my window, standing across the street, looking up at my building. When I grabbed my camera, she was gone, but I'd seen enough to confirm my suspicions. She was real, and she was watching me. I decided to follow her the next time I saw her. It took 3 days of watching from my window, but eventually she returned. I grabbed my jacket and keys, but by the time I reached the street, she'd vanished again. However, I noticed something I'd missed before, a small chalk mark on the building's entrance, fresh, deliberate. I photographed it and researched similar markings online. What I found chilled me. These marks were used by criminals to communicate information about targets. This particular symbol, according to several sources, indicated a single occupant, vulnerable, worth monitoring. I was being cataloged like an item in inventory. I confronted the building manager again, showing him the photograph. His reaction was immediate and telling. He became defensive, insisted he knew nothing about any markings, but promised to have the entrance cleaned. His hands shook slightly as he spoke, and I realized he was more afraid than confused. The truth started emerging in fragments. Through careful questioning and observation, I learned that several tenants had reported similar experiences. Small intrusions, subtle changes, the feeling of being watched. The building manager had been receiving complaints for months but hadn't connected them, or maybe he had and chose not to act. I found out about the woman through a neighbor who recognized my description. She'd been asking questions about residents, claiming to be a social worker conducting a survey. She'd been particularly interested in single occupants, their schedules, their habits. Some people had let her into their apartments, thinking she was legitimate. The police became more interested when I presented this information. They confirmed that there had been other reports in the area, a pattern of psychological harassment that seemed to target isolated individuals. The woman wasn't acting alone. There was a network, a system designed to identify and exploit vulnerable people. But identifying the problem wasn't the same as solving it. The woman disappeared after I started asking questions. The chalk marks stopped appearing. The intrusions into my apartment ceased. Yet I never felt safe again, because I realized that I'd only discovered the surface of something much larger and more organized than I'd imagined. The case officially remains open but inactive. The police have limited resources, and without concrete evidence of theft or physical harm, there's little they can do. I've changed my locks, installed additional security measures, but I know these are just temporary solutions. Someone out there knows where I live, how I think, what makes me vulnerable. Sometimes I wonder if the woman in the blue jacket was just a symptom of something bigger. Maybe she was being watched too, controlled by someone else in the network. Maybe we were all just pieces in a game whose rules we didn't understand. I still take my garbage out before I leave. But now I check it when I return, looking for signs that my space has been invaded again. The routine that once comforted me has become a reminder of how easily our sense of security can be shattered. And sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I still feel that someone is watching, waiting, planning their next move. The truth is, I may never know who was behind it all or why they chose me. But I've learned that safety is an illusion, and that the most terrifying crimes are often the ones that leave no visible scars, only the constant awareness that you're never truly alone. Crime 6. I was repainting the hallway when I noticed it, just below eye level on the back door frame. 3 parallel scratches, deep and recent, carved through the fresh coat. They weren't from an animal, too straight, too clean. I ran my nail along one. It was sharp enough to split skin. Right above them in pencil was a number, small, unfinished. I wiped it away without thinking, but when I came back with a brush, the scratches had gotten longer. The house had been empty for months before I moved in. The previous tenant, a woman in her 30s, had left suddenly. The landlord mentioned something about a family emergency, but his eyes shifted when he said it. I didn't press. I needed the place, and the rent was reasonable. I set my brush down and examined the door frame more carefully. The wood was old pine, soft enough to mark easily, but these gouges required force, deliberate pressure. I traced them with my finger, feeling the splinters catch my skin. The scratches formed a pattern, almost like tally marks, but incomplete. That evening I found myself staring at the door again. The scratches seemed darker in the dim light, more pronounced. I touched the wood where the pencil mark had been. My finger came away dusty, but underneath the smudge I could make out faint impressions, numbers, a sequence that had been written over and over, each attempt pressing deeper into the soft wood. I called the landlord. His voice was tight when he answered, and I could hear television noise in the background, some crime drama with sirens and shouting. "Those marks on the door frame," I said. "Were they there when she left?" Silence, then the sound of the TV being muted. "What marks?" "The scratches near the back door." "I don't know what you're talking about." But his breathing had changed, quicker, shallow. I recognized the sound from my own chest when I lied. The next morning I knocked on the neighbor's door. An elderly man answered, his face creased with suspicion until I introduced myself as the new tenant. His expression softened, but only slightly. "She was quiet," he said, glancing toward my house, "kept to herself mostly, but near the end she seemed different, nervous, always checking her locks." "Did you ever see anyone else around, visitors?" He shook his head. "Not visitors, but there was someone, a man who used to park across the street sometimes. Never got out of his car, just sat there." "Did you report it?" "Report what? Sitting in a car isn't a crime." His words lingered as I walked back. I found myself looking over my shoulder, scanning the street for unfamiliar vehicles. The scratches on the doorframe seemed to pulse in my peripheral vision, demanding attention. That afternoon I drove to the hardware store. The clerk who helped me select sandpaper was chatty, mentioning that business had been slow since the weather turned cold. When I described the scratches I needed to remove, his demeanor shifted. "Sounds like someone was trying to keep count of something," he said, running his thumb along the edge of the sandpaper. "My ex-wife used to do that, mark the days on her calendar, said it helped her remember." "Remember what?" "When things happened, bad things." I bought the sandpaper but didn't use it. Instead, I found myself studying the marks more closely. The pattern wasn't random. Each scratch was precisely placed, measured. I counted them again, 7, but the wood showed impressions of more, marks that had been sanded away or painted over. In the kitchen, I opened every drawer, every cabinet. Behind the silverware tray, my fingers found something the previous tenant had left behind. A small notebook, spiral-bound, with most of the pages torn out. The remaining sheets were covered in the same numbers I'd seen on the door frame, written in increasingly frantic handwriting. The dates spanned 3 months. Each entry was brief, just a number and a single word. Outside, watching, closer. The final entry was different. Instead of a number, there was a phone number written and crossed out multiple times. Below it, in shaky letters, "He knows I know." I dialed the number. It rang once, then went to voicemail. A man's voice, calm and measured. "You've reached the right number. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I hung up without speaking. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound seemed amplified. The house settling, wind through the trees, but underneath it all a scratching noise, soft, rhythmic, coming from the direction of the back door. I crept down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the cold floor. The scratching stopped as I approached. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. Nothing. But when I pulled away, I could smell something metallic, sharp, like pennies left in the rain. I turned on the porch light and peered through the window. The backyard was empty, but the scratches on the doorframe had changed again. More marks, deeper, and below them, carved into the wood with fresh precision, a single word: soon. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number: "Stop looking or join her." I called the police. The officer who responded was young, probably new to the force. He examined the doorframe with a flashlight, photographed the scratches, and took notes, but his questions focused on me. How long had I lived here? Did I know the previous tenant? Had I been experiencing any stress lately? "Sometimes people see things that aren't there," he said, his voice kind but patronizing. "New place, strange sounds, your mind can play tricks." After he left, I sat in the living room with all the lights on. The notebook was still in my hands, and I read through the entries again. The handwriting deteriorated over time, becoming more erratic, more desperate, but the numbers remained consistent, a countdown. The phone rang. I stared at it, watching the unknown number flash on the screen. On the fourth ring, I answered. "You found her book." The voice was the same one from the voicemail, calm, patient. "Who was this?" "Someone who's been waiting for you to understand." "Understand what?" "That some patterns repeat, that some people never really leave." The line went dead. I walked to the back door and touched the scratches again. They were warm under my fingertips, as if the wood itself was alive. The metallic smell was stronger now, mixed with something else, something organic and wrong. In the morning, I would pack my things. I would call the landlord and break the lease. I would tell myself that the scratches were just wood damage, that the notebook was a coincidence, that the phone calls were pranks. But I knew I would remember the feeling of those marks under my fingers, the way they seemed to grow when I wasn't looking, the certainty that somewhere in another house, on another door frame, someone else was starting to count. Crime 7, I lifted the lid to check a weak flush and froze. Floating in the tank was a mass of torn plastic bags, zip ties, something that looked like laminated paper curling at the edges. At the bottom, caught around the drain valve, was a strip of cloth, red and stiff. I reached in with gloves and pulled one of the pieces out. It was a photo, water damaged, bent but clear enough. It showed my hallway from above. The camera angle was impossible. No one could have taken this shot from where they were standing in my house, unless they had been in the ceiling. The thought made my skin crawl as I stared at the warped image, water droplets still clinging to its surface. The photo showed the exact spot where I stood every morning, checking my mail, keys in hand. Someone had been watching me, documenting my routine. I drained the tank completely and laid everything out on old newspapers in my garage. 17 pieces of plastic, 8 zip ties, fragments of what appeared to be surveillance notes written in blue ink, now smeared but still partially readable. The handwriting was small, precise, clinical. It documented my habits with the accuracy of a research study. The The times I left for work, when I returned, which lights I turned on first, what I ate for dinner on specific days. The red cloth turned out to be part of a sweater. When I recognized, it belonged to the woman who lived here before me. She had left suddenly, the neighbors mentioned when I moved in. Family emergency, they said. Her belongings were still in the basement when I bought the house, boxes of clothes and personal items the realtor told me I could dispose of. I had donated most of it without looking through it carefully, but I remembered this sweater because of its unusual color, like dried blood. I called the realtor who had handled the sale. Her voice became guarded when I mentioned finding items in the toilet tank. She claimed she knew nothing about surveillance equipment or why the previous owner had left so abruptly, but there was something in her tone that suggested she was choosing her words carefully. She mentioned that the woman had been concerned about her safety during the final weeks before moving out. Something about feeling watched, phone calls with no one speaking, mail going missing. The basement boxes were still there, pushed into a corner behind the water heater. I had forgotten about them completely. As I searched through them again, this time more thoroughly, I found folders filled with printed emails, screenshots of social media conversations, copies of police reports. The woman had been documenting harassment that went back months. Someone had been following her, taking pictures, leaving items on her doorstep, making her life systematically uncomfortable. The police reports made for disturbing reading. Multiple complaints filed, but each one dismissed as insufficient evidence or likely coincidence. The officer's notes suggested they viewed her as paranoid, possibly unstable, but the documentation she kept told a different story. Dates, times, locations where she felt she was being watched, photos of her car with scratches that appeared overnight, copies of identical items appearing in her grocery cart that she claimed she had not selected. Among the papers was a letter she had written but apparently never sent. It was addressed to someone she called the Watcher and detailed her decision to leave town permanently. She wrote that she could no longer distinguish between real threats and imagined ones, that the constant surveillance had made her question her own perceptions. The letter ended with an apology to whoever might find it, explaining that she was hiding evidence in places throughout the house in case something happened to her. I found the second cache of items inside the air conditioning vent in the master bedroom. More photos, these ones showing the exterior of the house at different times of day, taken from various angles that suggested the photographer had spent considerable time studying the property. There were also audio recordings on old cassette tapes, labeled with dates from several months before she moved out. The recordings captured sounds from inside the house, conversations she had on the phone, television programs she watched, even the sound of her shower running. The quality of the recordings was too clear to have been made from outside. Someone had been inside the house, placing recording devices, collecting data about her daily life with the patience of a scientist. The violation felt personal even though it had happened to someone else in my house before I ever lived there. I realized I had been sleeping in the same bedroom, walking the same hallways, following routines that had all been cataloged and studied by someone who remained invisible. I started noticing things about my own house that I had overlooked before. Tiny holes in the walls that could have been mounting points for cameras. Scratches around the locks that suggested they had been picked or tampered with. Areas of the carpet that seemed newer than others, as if sections had been replaced. The house began to feel like a crime scene where the crime was still ongoing. The woman's documentation included names and addresses of people she suspected might be responsible for the harassment. Neighbors, former colleagues, someone from her past who had been contacting her despite being told to stop. But the names were often incomplete or written in a code I could not decipher. She had been trying to protect herself while also protecting the privacy of people who might be innocent. Her notes showed the careful thinking of someone who understood that accusations without proof could destroy lives. I tried to contact her through the forwarding address she had left with the post office, but the address led to a mail service that claimed they had no current contact information. The phone number associated with her name had been disconnected. It was as if she had successfully disappeared, leaving behind only the evidence of what had driven her away. But her meticulous record-keeping suggested she had wanted someone to find these items, to understand what had happened, perhaps to continue an investigation she could not complete. The most unsettling discovery was a diagram she had drawn of the house, marking locations where she believed surveillance equipment had been installed. The toilet tank was circled in red ink with a note that said emergency backup location. She had hidden the most important evidence there because she believed it was the one place that would eventually be found by accident by whoever lived in the house after her. She had been counting on someone like me to discover her story. But as I studied her careful documentation, I began to wonder about the gaps in her narrative. Some of the dates on her police reports did not align with the timeline she presented in her personal notes. Photos that claimed to show evidence of harassment appeared to have been taken from inside the house, not by an external stalker. Her handwriting analysis of threatening letters seemed too detailed, too knowledgeable about forensic techniques for someone who claimed to be an ordinary victim. The realization came slowly, like a photograph developing in chemicals. The woman had been documenting her own behavior, creating evidence of stalking that she was conducting herself, perhaps against someone else entirely. The surveillance photos of my hallway had been taken by her from equipment she had installed herself. The toilet tank had been her hiding place not because she was being watched, but because she was the one doing the watching. The house had been her base of operations for systematically invading someone else's privacy. I am still living in her house, surrounded by the infrastructure she created for surveillance, wondering who she was really watching and whether that person ever discovered what was being done to them. The police reports she filed against imaginary stalkers might have been practice runs, testing how much evidence she would need to destroy someone's life. Or perhaps they were projections, documenting the harassment she was inflicting as if it were being done to her instead. The most disturbing possibility is that I am not the first person to discover her hidden materials. Someone else might have found them before me, might have understood their true meaning, and might have been watching me ever since I moved into this house. The surveillance system she built could still be operational, now turned against me by someone who learned her methods and decided to continue her work. I have become both the investigator and the potential target, living inside evidence of a crime that might still be happening. Crime 8, I was replacing a light bulb when I looked up and noticed them. Faint, dusty outlines of boots spaced evenly right above the hallway along the ceiling. I grabbed a step stool, heart thudding. The prints were upside down, like someone had walked across from the inside. I knocked gently on the plaster. It sounded hollow in the middle. When I climbed into the attic to check, there was nothing there but insulation and silence, except for a small patch of bare wood swept clean. The house had been my inheritance, passed down after my uncle's sudden death. He'd lived alone for decades, kept to himself, neighbors barely knew his name. I'd moved in without much thought, just grateful for a place to call home, but those prints changed everything. I started noticing other things. The kitchen window latch was bent inward, like someone had forced it from outside. There were scratches around the lock, fresh gouges in old wood. The basement door frame showed similar marks, splinters near the hinges that caught my fingernails when I ran my hand along them. My uncle's papers were still scattered in his desk drawer. insurance claims, medical records, receipts for home security installations that I'd never seen evidence of. A business card for a private investigator, edges worn smooth from handling. I called the number. The investigator's voice was gravelly, tired. He remembered my uncle well. Calls about someone watching the house, footsteps in the yard, feeling unsafe. The man had installed cameras, motion sensors, even changed the locks twice, but he'd never found concrete evidence of intrusion. I went through the house with new eyes. The living room carpet showed wear patterns that didn't match normal foot traffic. Someone had paced here, back and forth, wearing a path near the window. The curtains were faded in specific spots, as if they'd been moved aside repeatedly, hands gripping the same section of fabric. In the bedroom closet, I found a box of photographs. My uncle with friends, family gatherings, normal life captured in fading color, but tucked between the photos were newspaper clippings. Missing persons reports, unsolved cases, articles about home invasions, all from the surrounding area, all within the past few years. The investigator agreed to meet me. He brought a thick file, pages of notes in careful handwriting. My uncle had documented everything, strange sounds, objects moved, the feeling of being watched, but there was something else. The investigator leaned forward, voice dropping. My uncle had suspected someone specific, a former employee from his construction company, someone he'd had to fire for erratic behavior and theft. The man had made threats, knew the house layout from work visits, had keys to equipment that could access difficult spaces. I felt the temperature drop in the room. The attic access, the ceiling prints, the swept clean patch of wood. Someone had been living above me, moving through the house while my uncle slept below, maybe still moving through it now. The investigator pulled out a final document, police report, filed just days before my uncle's death. He'd called about sounds in the walls, someone moving above him, but officers found nothing. They listed it as a wellness check, noted signs of paranoia and anxiety. The report was signed off as no further action required. But I knew better now. I could feel it in the house's bones, in the way shadows fell differently in certain corners, in the smell of unwashed clothes that lingered in the hallway despite my cleaning efforts. Someone had been here, watching, waiting. I called the detective who'd handled my uncle's case. Death by natural causes, they said, heart attack in his sleep. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. Just an old man who'd lived alone too long, stressed himself into an early grave with paranoid delusions. But when I pressed for details, the detective's voice changed. There had been something odd about the scene. My uncle's bedroom door was locked from the inside, but the key was missing. They'd assumed he'd lost it somewhere, maybe thrown it away during one of his security obsessions. They'd had to break down the door to find him. I hung up and walked through the house again. Every creak of the floorboards above me sounded different now. The attic ladder was dusty, undisturbed, but I could see scuff marks on the wall where someone might have climbed without using it. The ceiling access panel was slightly askew, just enough to notice if you were looking for it. The swept clean patch in the attic nagged at me. I climbed up again, this time with a flashlight, examining every corner. Behind the insulation near the far wall, my light caught something metallic. I pulled away the pink fiberglass carefully, holding my breath. A small metal box, the kind used for important documents. Inside were photographs of my uncle's house, taken from angles that could only be achieved from inside. Pictures of him sleeping, eating, watching television. Date stamps showed they'd been taken over months, maybe years. At the bottom of the box was a key. brass, worn smooth, exactly the right size for a bedroom door lock. I sat in the attic for a long time, holding that key, feeling the weight of understanding settle over me. Someone had been here, watching my uncle, documenting his life, controlling his sense of safety. They'd driven him to paranoia, isolated him, made him question his own sanity. And when he'd finally locked his bedroom door for the last time, they'd made sure he couldn't unlock it again. The police had found no signs of struggle because there hadn't been one. Just an old man, terrified and alone, whose heart had given out from months of psychological torment. The perfect crime, leaving no evidence except the guilt of investigators who dismissed his fears as delusions. I left the house that night and never went back. The key is still in my pocket, a constant reminder of how easily someone can disappear into the spaces between our lives. How violation doesn't always leave bruises, how murder doesn't always require a weapon. Sometimes I wonder if they're still there, moving through the ceiling, waiting for the next occupant. Sometimes I wake up at night and check my own ceilings, looking for prints that shouldn't be there. Because now I know the truth. The most dangerous predators are the ones who never let you see them coming, who kill with patience and fear and the slow, steady erosion of everything you thought was safe. Crime 9, I leave them half open, always, but this time every blind in the living room was shut tight, slats tilted perfectly downward. I went to adjust one, but it wouldn't move. The string had been tied in a double knot and looped through the pull rod. When I looked closer, I realized the knot wasn't on my side of the window. It had been made from outside. I opened the window slowly. The screen was gone, and stuck between the sill and the glass was a single pressed leaf, wet, folded in half. The leaf felt wrong between my fingers, too soft, like it had been handled recently, pressed between pages of something before being placed there. I held it up to the light streaming through the now open window. Veins ran through it in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, but leaves don't think, people do. I started checking every window in the house. Kitchen normal, bedroom normal, but the bathroom window, the one I never opened, had scratches around the lock, fresh metal shavings on the sill. Someone had been working on it. The thought made my skin crawl, imagining hands fumbling with that lock while I slept just feet away. The pressed leaf bothered me for days. I kept it in a plastic bag, studying it during lunch breaks at work. My colleague noticed my distraction, asked what was wrong. When I explained about the blinds, about the leaf, she got that look people get when they think you're being paranoid. But she suggested I check with my neighbor across the street. He works from home, watches everything through his front window. His house smelled like coffee and old newspapers when he invited me in. Stacks of mail covered his kitchen table, some open, some not. He remembered that specific night because he'd been up late with insomnia. He'd seen someone moving around my yard but assumed it was me. Medium height, dark clothing, moving with purpose rather than stealth. The detail that stuck with him was how long they'd stayed at each window. Not quick, furtive movements, methodical, like they were measuring something. I asked if he'd seen their face. He hadn't, but he remembered one thing that made my stomach drop. The person had stood under my porch light for several minutes, looking directly at his window, as if they knew he was watching, as if they didn't care. That evening I found myself walking through my house differently. Every shadow seemed deeper, every creak in the floorboards louder. I checked the locks on all the windows twice before bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I lay there thinking about that leaf, about the methodical way someone had worked on my windows while I was vulnerable and unaware. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. The voice was familiar but strained, my sister, calling about our elderly aunt who lived alone across town. She'd been found by her cleaning lady, sitting in her chair unharmed but confused. All her blinds had been closed from the outside, the screens removed. and on her kitchen table, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 pressed leaves, each one folded in half. My hands shook as I drove to my aunt's house. The cleaning lady met me at the door, her face pale with worry. She'd been working for my aunt for years, knew her routines. My aunt always kept her blinds partially open, loved watching the birds in her yard. But that morning, every window was sealed shut, the knots tied from outside just like mine had been. My aunt sat in her favorite chair, hands folded in her lap, staring at the circle of leaves on the table. When I asked her about them, her eyes focused on me with an intensity that was both lucid and terrifying. She said she'd woken in the middle of the night to the sound of someone walking around her house, slow, deliberate steps. She'd been too frightened to look outside, too frightened to call for help. She just sat in that chair until morning, listening to the footsteps circle her home again and again. The leaves on her table were different varieties, oak, maple, birch species that grew in different parts of the neighborhood. Someone had collected them, pressed them, planned this. The cleaning lady mentioned something that made my blood run cold. She'd noticed similar leaves at other houses in the area over the past few weeks. Always elderly residents living alone. Always the same pattern of closed blinds and removed screens. I started keeping a notebook documenting everything. Addresses where I'd heard similar stories. Dates when neighbors reported unusual activity. The pattern was there, subtle but undeniable. Someone was targeting older residents, marking them somehow, but for what purpose I couldn't understand. The breakthrough came when I was reviewing my notes in a coffee shop downtown. The barista, a young woman with tired eyes, overheard me talking on the phone about the leaf incidents. She approached my table hesitantly, said she'd been wondering if she should report something to the police. Her grandmother had experienced the same thing weeks ago. Blinds closed from outside, pressed leaves left behind, but there was more. Her grandmother had mentioned seeing someone she recognized walking around the property. Someone from the neighborhood who'd recently started offering handyman services to elderly residents. The handyman story led me to more conversations, more connections. Several elderly residents had hired the same person for small repairs in the weeks before their windows were tampered with. Someone who would have seen their routines, their vulnerabilities, their habits. Someone who knew which houses had single occupants, which windows were never opened, which neighbors paid attention. I found myself driving past these houses at different hours, watching for patterns of my own. The methodical nature of the incidents suggested surveillance, planning, but what disturbed me most was the realization that I'd seen the handyman's truck in my own neighborhood, parked across from my house on the day I'd discovered my blinds had been altered. The pressed leaves weren't random vandalism or simple breaking and entering. They were signatures, markers left by someone who wanted their presence known but not understood. Someone who took satisfaction in the fear they created, in the violation of security and privacy. Someone who understood that the psychological impact of their actions would linger long after the physical evidence was discovered. But as I compiled more information, cross-referenced dates and locations, I began to notice something that made me question everything I thought I knew. The timing of my own incident didn't align with the others. It had happened before I'd started investigating, before I'd talked to any neighbors or victims, which meant I wasn't just documenting these events, I was part of them. The first target, or perhaps something else entirely. The notebook in my hands felt heavier as I realized that my investigation might have been guided from the beginning. The neighbor who'd suggested I talk to other people. The barista who'd conveniently overheard my conversation, even my aunt's cleaning lady who'd been so helpful in providing details about the incident. What if none of these encounters had been coincidental? I closed the notebook and looked around the coffee shop. Everyone seemed ordinary, focused on their own business. but someone in this network of helpful neighbors and concerned citizens knew more than they were saying. Someone had orchestrated not just the incidents themselves, but my discovery of them. The pressed leaves weren't just calling cards left for the victims. They were breadcrumbs leading me somewhere I wasn't sure I wanted to go. The last entry in my notebook contained a detail I'd almost overlooked. My aunt had mentioned that the person walking around her house had stopped at each window for the same amount of time, methodical, measured, as if they were counting. I realized I'd never timed how long it took to tie those knots from the outside, to remove a screen, to place a leaf just so. But someone had. Someone had practiced until they could do it efficiently, quietly, with precision. That someone might still be watching, still planning, still counting. And I might be next on their list. Story 10. In the old apartment, peculiar sounds echoed through the pipes and floorboards, creating a symphony of groans and creaks. Yet the new tenant sensed a difference in the rhythm of the noises that surrounded her. The footsteps above were too precise, too deliberate to be dismissed as mere settling of the building. Slow and measured, they traversed the ceiling, though she resided on the topmost floor. One fateful night, she summoned her courage and tapped the broomstick against the ceiling. The footsteps halted abruptly, plunging the space into an eerie silence. Then, a single knock resounded from within the very ceiling itself. Sarah Coleman kept the strange knocking incident to herself, attributing it to the idiosyncrasies of the old building, or perhaps a curious animal exploring the attic. Night after night, the methodical footfalls continued, tracing invisible paths above her in the darkness. Sarah adapted, drowning out the unsettling sounds with heightened TV volumes and bedtime headphones, seeking refuge in a cocoon of artificial noise. Detective Morris was drawn into the enigma surrounding the apartment when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine repairs. Removing a section of drywall to address a leak outside Sarah's unit, the worker uncovered a narrow passage that defied the building's blueprints. Within this hidden realm, illuminated by a flashlight beam, lay a makeshift living space adorned with scattered food wrappers, water bottles, a soiled blanket, and a weathered notebook. The discovery prompted an urgent call to the authorities. Upon arrival, Detective Morris and his partner encountered a visibly shaken maintenance worker, haunted by the revelation that someone had been dwelling within the very walls of the building. The notebook divulged meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman's daily life, her routines, visitors, meals, and even her smallest habits. The once neat handwriting descended into chaos, interspersed with cryptic symbols hinting at a disturbed mind. The final entry lamented Sarah's defiance and the writer's insistence on being acknowledged. She has chosen to ignore me. No one ignores me. Forensic teams meticulously combed the hidden passages, uncovering fingerprints that eluded identification in any database. The labyrinthine network of secret passages interwoven within the building's structure dated back decades, connecting multiple apartments but culminating in discrete viewing points concealed within Sarah's abode. Interviews with current tenants yielded no unusual accounts, while former residents shared unsettling experiences of feeling watched or hearing unexplained disturbances, yet refrained from speaking out for fear of appearing paranoid. A breakthrough emerged when forensic analysis unveiled microscopic traces of blood in one of the crawl spaces, linked through DNA testing to Martin Weaver, a former occupant who had vanished without a trace years prior. As Detective Morris delved deeper into the case, a pattern emerged regarding a reclusive tenant named Edward, who had lived below Martin and subsequently disappeared following a confrontation. Edward's transient history of residing in top-floor apartments, his aversion to social interactions, and his enigmatic departures underscored a chilling narrative of evasion and obscurity. The investigation culminated in the unearthing of a secluded cabin on remote land owned by Edward, revealing a chilling tableau of surveillance materials. Photographs, maps of ventilation systems, and journals chronicling the observation of specimens hinted at a meticulous and sinister preoccupation. A corkboard adorned with missing persons reports tied Edward to a string of disappearances, each victim representing a former resident of his past abodes. Beneath the board, the ground bore witness to the weight of repeated drag marks, a silent testament to unspeakable deeds. As forensic experts endeavored to identify the remains unearthed near Edward's cabin, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's apartment building. Though the crawl spaces had been sealed, reports of enigmatic noises persisted. During the installation of enhanced security measures, a chilling discovery emerged: a newer notebook tucked in a crevice where wall met ceiling. The opening message, "They found my old nest, but not my new one," echoed the cryptic musings of the previous notebook. A diagram of Sarah's apartment layout with a newly marked passage in red forewarned of impending events. Rushed attempts to locate Sarah proved futile as her dwelling stood abandoned, a silent testament to the lurking danger that had encroached upon her sanctuary. A cryptic message etched onto a steamed mirror, "Look up," hinted at the unseen peril that had lurked above her. The subsequent manhunt for Edward, now known as Edward Mercer, unveiled a sinister past rooted in his expertise as a construction worker, enabling his clandestine construction of hidden passages and observation points within occupied spaces. Thermal scans of Sarah's building revealed no traces of current occupancy within the walls, leaving a chilling void where Edward's presence once loomed. Sarah Coleman's disappearance became entwined with a web of similar vanishing acts across state lines, prompting authorities to caution building managers regarding unauthorized modifications and concealed spaces that could harbor unseen dangers. Amidst the haunting echoes of footsteps and whispered secrets, Detective Morris found himself haunted by the spectral image of Sarah, ensnared in a web of inexplicable events that transcended the boundaries of reason and security. As night descended, enveloping his own dwelling in shadows, Detective Morris cast a wary gaze upward, pondering the unseen forces that may linger beyond his sight. The silence of the night was punctuated by the phantom echoes of footsteps, a reminder of the mysteries that remained concealed within the walls, waiting to unveil their dark secrets to those who dared to listen. Story 11. The quaint costume emporium was on the verge of closing its doors, the air heavy with nostalgia as old treasures found new owners. Among the dwindling relics, a woman's gaze fell upon a mask tucked away on a forgotten shelf, its intricate features both enchanting and eerily realistic. As she placed it on the worn countertop, the cashier hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "That mask doesn't belong here," he murmured cryptically. Perplexed, the woman sought a tag, only to find none. With a casual shrug, she decided to take the mysterious mask home with her. In the dead of night, a hushed whisper of fabric drew her from slumber. Her eyes fluttered open to find the mask perched on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. This woman, known as Catherine Reed, would soon become a mere shadow of a memory, discovered by a concerned neighbor one fateful morning. The neighbor, returning a borrowed book, stumbled upon a scene that would echo through the corridors of time. Catherine lay motionless on her bedroom floor, the mask vanished without a trace. Detective Morgan arrived at the somber scene, where morning light danced with shadows, casting an eerie glow. Clicks of shutters punctuated the silence as voices murmured in reverence. No signs of forced entry, an officer observed, jotting notes in a worn pad. The detective's keen eyes scanned the room, noting subtle details that whispered of secrets. A drawer slightly ajar, a lipstick-stained water glass, all seemingly ordinary in contrast to the tragedy that befell the woman who now lay in eternal repose. The medical examiner, with a solemn countenance, declared the cause of death a baffling enigma. No visible wounds, no evidence of a struggle, only the chilling expression of terror etched into Catherine's features. Leaning in closer, the detective mused softly. Something frightened her to her very core. Catherine, a connoisseur of art, lived a life draped in quiet sophistication. Her discerning eye for authenticity was renowned, her ability to discern a forgery unparalleled. Colleagues reminisced about her unwavering dedication to detail, her boss fondly recalling her knack for spotting discrepancies with ease. The detective pondered whether this exceptional talent had inadvertently led to her demise. A pivotal moment in the investigation emerged when forensic analysis uncovered microscopic fibers entwined within Catherine's fingertips. She clutched at something, the lab technician revealed. These fibers bear a strange composition, part human hair, part unidentified organic matter that eludes identification within databases. The threads of the inquiry unraveled a tapestry of inexplicable deaths spanning decades, each victim linked by a common thread, the acquisition of a peculiar mask preceding their demise. A retired detective, a sage in the realm of unsolved mysteries, shared a revelation. Behind the inner lining of each mask, ancient symbols whispered of a ritual steeped in soul transference. A clandestine journal concealed within Catherine's abode unveiled the terror that gripped her in the final moments. Her frantic scribblings detailed a malevolent force lurking within the mask, a malevolence that transcended time and claimed souls in its relentless pursuit. The detective pieced together the puzzle, the enigmatic fibers, Catherine's haunting discoveries, a pattern woven with threads of fear and death. A haunting revelation surfaced as surveillance footage captured an enigmatic figure departing Catherine's residence, cloaked in a semblance of her essence, yet moving with a mechanical precision that defied nature. A chilling realization dawned: the mask was not just an object, but a vessel of malevolence, a harbinger of dread that sought new hosts to ensnare in its macabre dance. The elusive mask resurfaced months later in a distant vintage emporium, evading the grasp of justice once more. Its new owner remained a ghostly enigma, slipping through the cracks of accountability. The case lingered in the shadows of uncertainty, a chilling testament to forces beyond mortal comprehension. In the hushed confines of the detective's office, Catherine's journal found a resting place, a grim reminder of the enigmatic truth that defied conventional logic. As night's veils descended, the detective would startle awake, a phantom sensation of being watched haunting her senses. She would secure her sanctuary, warding off the specter of the mask that hungered for souls, biding its time until it found a new bearer. The mask, a silent sentinel of dread, awaited its next unwitting victim, its hollow gaze fixated on the pulsing essence of life that dwelled behind mortal eyes. And when it found its quarry, another soul would awaken to the chilling presence of the mask, a harbinger of doom that traversed centuries in search of vessels to ensnare in its eternal embrace. Story 12. In the attic of their newly acquired Victorian house, Sarah and Michael stumbled upon a hidden treasure, a porcelain doll with piercing blue eyes, concealed beneath a worn blanket. The doll exuded an air of mystery, its age evident in the delicate features and the unyielding gaze of those painted eyes. Unfamiliar with its origin, the couple brushed off its significance as just another forgotten relic of the past. That night, however, a subtle shift permeated the atmosphere within their home. The air grew heavier, laden with an unspoken tension. Silence blanketed the space, stretching into an eerie stillness that unsettled even the bravest of souls. Upon waking the following morning, a chilling discovery awaited them. The doll that once resided in the attic now sat ominously at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel in the dim light of dawn. Sarah and Michael, captivated by the house's intricate woodwork and enigmatic allure, had been drawn to its history, oblivious to the role they would soon play in its unfolding narrative. Detective Rachel Winters, tasked with unraveling the mysteries that shrouded the old house, received a call on a crisp autumn morning, beckoning her to a scene of inexplicable horror. In the master bedroom, the female victim lay in a grotesque pose, her eyes wide with fear, a silent witness to unspeakable terror. Nearby, the male victim appeared as if fleeing from an unseen menace, his body frozen in a desperate attempt at escape. Detective Winters, her voice barely above a whisper, noted the deliberate arrangement of the bodies, likening the female victim to a doll plucked from its display case, a macabre puppet in a tragic play. As the investigation unfolded, a tapestry of unsettling accounts emerged from the neighbors' shadows lurking behind windows, ghostly laughter echoing through the night, each tale weaving a thread of unease into the fabric of the case. Forensic analysis revealed traces of vintage fibers, akin to those used in antique doll clothing, clustered around the victims and the attic space, hinting at a connection that transcended the boundaries of the physical realm. Delving into the house's history unveiled a pattern of inexplicable deaths spanning decades, each cloaked in enigmatic circumstances and eerie occurrences. A newspaper clipping led Detective Winters to a dark chapter in the houses, past a doll maker whose final creation bore a haunting resemblance to the doll found by Sarah and Michael, a doll rumored to harbor a sinister secret. The discovery of hidden photographs, coupled with infrared revelations of spectral handprints traversing the house, painted a chilling portrait of a malevolent presence bound to the very walls of the old house. An encounter with a descendant of the doll maker shed light on arcane rituals and unholy practices, hinting at a darkness that defied rational explanation. As the investigation reached an impasse, the doll vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a legacy of unsolved mysteries. Detective Winters, her final act shrouded in secrecy, safeguarded a haunting memento of the case, a testament to the enigmatic forces that dwelled within the walls of the Victorian house. The new owners, unaware of the house's dark history, chose to leave the attic undisturbed, a silent pact with the unknown. Yet on nights cloaked in silence, whispers of a spectral presence lingered in the air, a fleeting reminder of the past that refused to be forgotten. And in those moments, as the world slept and dreams wove their tapestries of illusion, the dollmaker's creation whispered its secrets to the shadows, a timeless enigma destined to haunt the corridors of memory. Story 13. In the dimly lit coffee shop that had become a familiar sanctuary, a man with no name, only known as John Doe, followed a routine shrouded in mystery. Each day he would enter quietly, order his black coffee with no sugar, and retreat to his secluded corner table. The barista recognized his face, yet his true identity remained an enigma to all. But one fateful day, John Doe failed to make his usual appearance, leaving behind only a forgotten wallet containing a driver's license with empty fields where a name and address should have resided. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the perplexing case, studying the security footage that revealed a baffling truth. John had entered the coffee shop, took his usual seat, but inexplicably vanished without a trace. As Mercer scrutinized the footage, a chilling realization crept over her. The man had simply ceased to exist within the confines of the shop. The investigation unfolded with eerie discoveries that deepened the enigma surrounding John Doe. His belongings, including a cryptic notebook filled with coded messages and peculiar sketches of buildings unknown to the area, offered no clues to his true identity. The driver's license, credit cards with non-existent accounts, and a blank business card with a mysterious phone number only added to the perplexity. As Mercer delved deeper into the mystery, peculiar anomalies in the security footage caught her attention. A flicker in the time stamp each morning when John entered the shop hinted at something beyond rational explanation. Her pursuit of the truth led her to a peculiar antique mirror hanging in the coffee shop, seemingly untouched for years. The mirror, adorned with cryptic symbols akin to those in John's notebook, concealed a hidden compartment containing identical wallets and a journal penned with entries spanning decades. The writing spoke of experiments in temporal displacement and identity transference, hinting at a profound connection between the mysterious man and the mirror. Strange occurrences began to manifest around the coffee shop as the investigation unfolded. Witnesses reported sightings of John Doe where he should not have been, and reflections in the window glass took on a life of their own. The pieces of the puzzle started to align when an elderly physicist named Margaret Keller shed light on John's true identity as Daniel Weston, a brilliant scientist lost to an experiment involving quantum mirrors and parallel realities. With newfound knowledge, Mercer uncovered the coffee shop's dark secret. It stood upon the very grounds where Weston's experiments had taken place. The convergence of realities, weak points, and mirrored gateways painted a picture of a man trapped between worlds, unable to escape the confines of his own creation. As Mercer delved deeper into the mystery, a chilling revelation emerged from the shattered mirror, one that hinted at the completion of an experiment and the closure of a window between worlds. The case of the man who didn't exist remained an unsolvable enigma, haunting the memories of those involved. In the aftermath, the coffee shop closed its doors, the building demolished, and Daniel Weston's fate left unresolved. Detective Mercer, haunted by the mysteries she had uncovered, found solace in writing, mirroring Weston's own habits. A shard of the antique mirror adorned her wall, a silent witness to the inexplicable events that had unfolded within its reflection. Story 14. The ancient library faced its imminent demise as the construction crew neared completion of the demolition. Amid the clatter of destruction, a worker stumbled upon a hidden latch discreetly nestled within a dusty bookshelf. With a gentle click, the entire shelving unit swung open, unveiling a narrow passageway leading to a secret chamber. The air within was heavy, untouched for decades, suffused with a sense of mystery and neglect. There were no furnishings in sight except for a solitary chair anchored to the floor at the room's center. Etched repeatedly on the wall, a haunting message echoed, "I am still here." The foreman, taken aback by this unexpected discovery, swiftly contacted the authorities. What had started as a routine demolition swiftly spiraled into a chilling enigma. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of service under his belt, stepped into the hidden room. His flashlight pierced the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the cryptic message that adorned the walls. "Secure the area," Walsh instructed his team, his voice resonating in the confined space. "No one interferes until the forensic team arrives." The library's history provided a captivating backdrop to the unfolding mystery. Once owned by the esteemed Harrington family, The building had been bequeathed to the public following the unexplained disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Vanishing during her final year of college, Rebecca left behind no trace except for her abandoned car near the woods. Despite extensive searches and inquiries, the case grew cold, with speculation suggesting she had fled to forge a new identity, a theory vehemently refuted by her grieving family, who harbored suspicions of a more sinister fate. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they unearthed hair and fiber samples embedded in the chair, alongside minuscule traces of blood and skin cells within the scratched messages on the wall. Initial analysis hinted at a young female's biological composition. This chair was intended for confinement, the forensic analyst remarked, gesturing to the worn leather straps and bolt holes adorning the arms. Whoever was held here fought vigorously. Detective Walsh mobilized a team to delve into the Harrington family's past. The timing of the library's donation gnawed at him, a gift bestowed upon the community shortly after Rebecca's vanishing, a peculiar coincidence that now bore weighty significance. Further inquiries unveiled a disquieting revelation. The bookshelf concealing the hidden chamber had been installed by a contractor exclusively engaged by Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the family's patriarch. Financial records disclosed exorbitant payments to this contractor, surpassing standard renovation expenses. Former library staff expressed astonishment at the clandestine room's existence, with one elderly librarian recalling Maxwell's solitary visits to that section of the building after hours. Maxwell insisted that area remained untouched during renovations, she recounted to the investigators. He claimed the original woodwork was of historical importance and irreplaceable. The investigation took a harrowing turn when DNA tests confirmed the genetic material in the hidden room matched samples from Rebecca's hairbrush recovered from her old bedroom. The pieces of the puzzle began to align, painting a grim tableau. Rebecca had not fled, she had been imprisoned behind the bookshelf, potentially by a member of her own kin. Securing a warrant, the detectives scoured the Harrington estate. In Maxwell's study, they unearthed a leather-bound journal concealed in a false bottom drawer. The journal chronicled months of entries detailing an unsettling fixation on his niece. The final entry sent shivers down their spines. She threatened to expose everything. I cannot allow that. The room will confine her until she comprehends. Locating Maxwell in a coastal retirement community, the investigators confronted him. Initially stoic, he disavowed any knowledge of the hidden chamber, dismissing it as an architectural oddity. However, when faced with the damning evidence, his veneer crumbled. She was a threat to everything, he confessed tonelessly. Rebecca stumbled upon financial records unveiling my embezzlement from the family foundation. The family's reputation was paramount. I couldn't let her dismantle it. Maxwell's admission unveiled a ghastly truth. He had lured Rebecca to the library, subdued her, and ensnared her in the concealed chamber. His intent was to retain her until she consented to silence, but the plan went awry. In a bid to escape, Rebecca had met her demise during a struggle with him. I acted in panic, Maxwell disclosed during his confession. I buried her beneath the chamber's floorboards and sealed it shut. Donating the building ensured that section would remain undisturbed. Ground-penetrating technology confirmed human remains beneath the chamber's flooring. As excavation commenced, Rebecca's skeletal remains emerged, adorned with the silver bracelet her parents had gifted her on her 20th birthday. The Harrington family witnessed Maxwell's sentencing, a moment of closure long overdue. Clutching her daughter's retrieved bracelet, Rebecca's mother found solace in laying her child to rest, albeit in fragments after years of uncertainty. The library's demolition halted indefinitely, transforming into a site of remembrance and contemplation. Locals adorn the entrance with flowers, paying homage to a life truncated prematurely and a revelation concealed behind a bookshelf, awaiting its eventual revelation. In a poignant twist of fate, Rebecca's plea, "I am still here," scrawled desperately on the walls, guaranteed her eternal remembrance and the eventual triumph of justice, no matter how deferred, in finding its path to illumination. Story 15, The Enigmatic Victorian. She crossed the threshold, the dust dancing in a stagnant air, a silent witness to the years of abandonment that cloaked the old Victorian house. Its walls, once grand, now stood peeling and forlorn, draped furniture shrouded in ghostly sheets. Each step she took felt like a frozen moment in time, a suspended reality, save for one peculiar anomaly that whispered of mystery. Doors, portals to unknown realms, beckoned from every corner of the house. Yet with each twist of a handle and every corridor she ventured down, she found herself always returning to the parlor, trapped in a maze of familiarity and bewilderment. The only escape lay in retracing her steps, but when she turned to seek the safety of the entrance, it had vanished into thin air, leaving her stranded in a labyrinth of her own making. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless form transformed the once forgotten Victorian from a mere curiosity to a chilling crime scene, shrouded in whispers and shadows. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the threshold, a somber sentinel observing as forensic technicians moved through the dim expanse like phantoms in the night. The house, once known for its unsettling reputation where compasses spun aimlessly, and whispers of unseen eyes lingered, now held secrets darker than the tales that echoed through the town. The preliminary examination suggests a time of death approximately 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his words a hushed echo in the stillness. Asphyxiation appears to be the cause. Morgan, serene in her final repose, sat in an ancient chair in the parlor, her gaze fixed upon the entrance as if awaiting a long-lost visitor. No signs of struggle marred her peaceful countenance, her hands folded with a delicate grace. The scene exuded a quiet unease, a stillness that unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. "Who discovered the body?" Lind inquired, her gaze scanning the notes spread before her. "The real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers," her partner replied. "They stumbled upon her seated there, mistaking her for a trespasser until they drew closer." The house had stood vacant since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, 5 long years ago. Legal disputes had left the property in a state of limbo, unwanted and forgotten, save for the curious souls who dared to tread its decaying halls. Morgan Pierce, a young scholar of 26, delved into the depths of architectural anomalies for her thesis, a seeker of truths hidden in the shadows of unconventional design. Known for her meticulous nature and unyielding ambition, she found herself drawn to the abandoned Victorian, a siren's call luring her into its enigmatic embrace. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days prior, Lind remarked. Morgan spoke of visiting the house where people vanish for her research. As the investigation unfolded, a tapestry of Morgan's visits to the house unfurled. Her journal entries whispered of strange echoes that danced through the corridors, of icy tendrils that caressed her skin, of doors that defied logic by leading to ever-changing chambers with each turn of the knob. In her final musings, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to capture the elusive spatial inconsistencies, equipment that now lay shrouded in mystery. The autopsy uncovered a hidden detail, a trace of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, a substance derived from a plant used in ancient shamanic rituals. Though known to induce disorientation and vivid visions, the quantity found was not enough to claim a life. She wasn't one for recreational substances, her boyfriend insisted during questioning. Morgan held her research in the highest regard. She wouldn't have jeopardized her perception willingly. Digital breadcrumbs led to deleted messages on Morgan's phone, conversations with a kindred spirit captivated by the secrets the house held. Their exchanges, a dance of intimacy and enigma, spoke of a shared understanding of the shadows that lurked within the walls. The house retains the memories of its past, one message whispered. It yearns for someone to unravel its truths. The path of investigation wound its way to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian whose expertise in rare spatial phenomena had captured Morgan's attention. Their professional camaraderie blossomed into a bond tinged with the enigmatic allure of the house's mysteries. When questioned, Reeves bore the weight of grief upon his shoulders, his eyes haunted by the specter of loss. The house is steeped in legend, he confessed. Its architect wove illusions and distortions into its very fabric. Morgan believed there was more to it, a truth beyond mere trickery. Yet Reeves stood alibied for the time of Morgan's passing, his presence confirmed by university footage miles away from the scene of the tragedy. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, the grandson of a leaner Blackwood, now residing in a distant land. Contacted by the investigators, he unraveled a tapestry of familial secrets buried beneath the layers of time. My grandmother was not the sole Blackwood to meet their end in that house, he whispered. Others fell victim to its siren song, found in the parlor, their faces serene in eternal repose. The family referred to it as the claiming. Journals, brittle with age, surfaced a testament to generations lost to the house's silent embrace. Deaths masked as natural occurrences, each soul succumbing to the insidious influence that pervaded the corridors. A secondary sweep of the property unveiled a hidden chamber behind the parlor's hearth, a sanctuary of relics spanning cultures and epochs, arranged with a meticulous hand. At its heart rested a weathered figurine, a deity of liminal spaces, bearing the weight of centuries upon its weathered form. The residue upon the artifacts mirrored the alkaloid that coursed through Morgan's veins. The case took a chilling turn as the dust whispered of a presence unknown, a ghostly visitor who shared the house with Morgan in her final moments. Partial prints, foreign to all known visitors, clung to the doorknobs like phantoms of the past. 3 weeks into the investigation, Adam Reeves joined Morgan in the realm beyond, his form seated in silent vigil, the same alkaloid staining his essence. Clutched in his grasp, a key of unknown origin, a key that found its home in the hidden compartment of the Victorian. In his final missive, a testament to the house's insidious charm, Reeves penned, "The house ensnares not the body but the mind. The doors laid where they have always led, yet the mind weaves illusions of circles. Once the truth dawns, escape beckons, but by then the desire to depart has waned." The case, a riddle without solution, lingered in the shadows of uncertainty, marked as suspicious deaths awaiting the light of truth. The Victorian, now condemned and shunned by the living, stood as a sentinel to the enigma that dwelled within its walls. Whispers like tendrils of mist spoke of lights flickering within its chambers on moonlit nights, of visitors who vanished into the ether, swallowed by the house's insatiable hunger. Some whispered of a curse that claimed those who dared to seek its truths, while others spoke of a bond forged between Morgan, Reeves, and a force ancient and primordial, a force that thrived in the spaces between worlds. The truth, a specter that eluded grasp, lingered like a phantom in a house where all doors led back to the beginning, a house where time stood still, and the mysteries of the past whispered through the halls in a haunting lullaby of the forgotten. Story 16. The age department exuded a sense of history, its creaking heating system and rattling pipes creating a familiar symphony of sounds that echoed through the halls. To her, it was all part of the charm, the quirks of an old building settling in for the night. But one evening, as she settled into her cozy space, a faint voice drifted through the vents, barely discernible yet undeniably present. It was not the usual background noise of neighbors going about their lives. This was a whisper calling to her, invoking her name in a hushed tone. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, she leaned in closer, pressing her ear against the cool metal grate. A rush of icy air brushed against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. And then, almost teasingly, the voice spoke again, soft and eerie. "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw found herself standing in the heart of the vacant apartment, a sense of unease settling in the air around her. Her gaze was fixed upon the rusted vent cover that had been pried open, revealing a glimpse into a mystery that defied logic. The forensics team moved with practiced precision, capturing every detail with their cameras as if trying to freeze the moment in time. Alina Reeves, the missing woman whose fate had brought them here, had a story that was as puzzling as it was tragic. Her disappearance had gone unnoticed for days until the telltale odor had finally caught someone's attention, and what they uncovered within the confines of the ventilation system was beyond comprehension. Officer Patel recited the details from his notepad, recounting Alina's claims of hearing voices through the vents, a plea for help that had fallen on deaf ears. The scratches around the vent edges spoke of a struggle, of someone desperate to break free from an unseen prison. Shaw knelt beside the vent, her fingers tracing the marks left behind, a silent acknowledgement of the terror that had unfolded within these walls. Alina had been a beloved figure in her community, a gentle soul with a penchant for nurturing life in the form of her flourishing houseplants. Her disappearance had left a void that reverberated through the lives of those who knew her, each memory tinged with a sense of loss and bewilderment. As Shaw delved deeper into Alina's world, she uncovered a tapestry of paranoia and fear that had consumed the missing woman in the days leading up to her vanishing. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered throughout the apartment: the meticulously made bed, the abandoned coffee mug, the chair positioned beneath the vent as if waiting for a visitor who never arrived. The forensic evidence painted a haunting picture, linking Alina's favorite cardigan to the fibers found in the vent, a silent testament to her presence in this eerie realm. And then there was the fingerprint, a stranger's mark etched inside the vent cover, a chilling reminder that the truth was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The recordings from Alina's phone offered a glimpse into her final moments, capturing the fragile thread of her sanity as it unraveled in the face of the unknown. Shaw listened in solitude, the sound of rain providing a somber backdrop to the spectral voices that echoed through the darkness. The building itself held secrets within its aging walls, a history marred by whispers of past tenants who had fled in fear, their stories buried beneath layers of time. Harold Weber, the enigmatic superintendent, stood at the center of it all, his calm facade masking a darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. The revelation of a hidden passage within Alina's bathroom opened a doorway to a realm of nightmares, a narrow corridor that snaked through the building like a serpent, connecting every corner with a web of shadows. Within this hidden domain, they found traces of a presence, a phantom who had made a home within the walls, a silent observer who had watched and waited. Weber's meticulously organized files unveiled a tapestry of obsession, a twisted mosaic of voyeurism and delusion that had consumed his every waking moment. The recordings, the photographs, the digital diary all laid bare the extent of his madness, the depths of his depravity. And then, in a nondescript storage unit, they unearthed the relics of his past conquests, a macabre collection of mementos that spoke of lives interrupted, souls trapped in a limbo of terror. Weber's arrest was a foregone conclusion, his serene demeanor a facade that crumbled under the weight of his sins. As the trial unfolded, the truth of Weber's depravity was laid bare for all to see, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the everyday. His conviction was swift, a testament to the horrors he had unleashed upon an unsuspecting world. But even as justice was served, a lingering sense of unease hung in the air, a whisper of dread that reverberated through the empty halls of the apartment building. Residents spoke in hushed tones of strange sounds emanating from the vents, of voices that lingered in the shadows, of a presence that defied explanation. The building stood as a silent witness to the horrors that had transpired within its walls, a sentinel guarding the secrets of the past. And as night fell, the echoes of the past whispered through the darkness, a haunting reminder that some nightmares never truly fade away. Story 17, the old house had sat empty, shrouded in silence for years. Whispers from the neighbors hinted that it had been abandoned ever since the young woman vanished without a trace. Yet when the new occupants ventured inside, they stumbled upon a locked bedroom, its secrets hidden behind closed doors. With a creak and a groan, they forced their way in, greeted by the stagnant air heavy with the weight of time. But there was an unsettling feeling lingering, a sense of something amiss in the stillness. The bed was impeccably made, untouched by time, while the mirror gleamed free of dust. Upon the desk, a single candle had dwindled to a mere puddle of wax, frozen in time like tears unshed. And there, laid bare before them, was a notebook unfolded to a fresh page, the ink glistening in the dim light. The final entry bore a date from the night she vanished, a haunting message etched onto the paper. Detective Morgan delved into the notebook's contents, his fingers tracing the words penned by Elise Winters, a young woman of 26 who had disappeared into the shadows 5 years prior. Her script danced elegantly across the pages, each stroke precise and deliberate until the last entry, where the ink bled with urgency, leaving imprints on the blank canvas of pages to come. "I know he's watching me tonight," the final words whispered from the paper. "The same car circling like a vulture. I've cried out for aid, but my pleas fall on deaf ears. If fate should snatch me away, know it was no chance occurrence." Closing the notebook, the detective secured it in an evidence bag, the scent of dust mingling with a faint hint of something chemical in the air. The landlord lingered in the doorway, his pallor betraying a sense of unease. "We checked every nook before listing it," he murmured, his arms crossed in silent defense. "That door was never locked." Elise had been a diligent paralegal at Harriman and Associates, a prestigious legal firm entangled in high-stakes battles. Her colleagues painted a picture of a meticulous soul, dedicated yet gradually retreating into solitude in the days leading up to her disappearance. Late nights became her refuge, her supervisor recounted to the investigators, a hint of sorrow in his voice. She stumbled upon discrepancies in the Westridge files, anomalies that whispered of deceit. Photographs of Elise adorned the room, her auburn locks framing serious eyes behind scholarly spectacles, her attire always poised and professional. The woman frozen in time seemed too composed to vanish without a trace, too methodical to abandon all she held dear. The bedroom bore scant clues, a void of struggle or spilt blood. It stood frozen in a perfect tableau, as if Elise had momentarily stepped away, intending to return at any moment. The candle, a relic of bygone flames, stood as a silent witness to the mysteries concealed within the room. Turning to the forensic light, Morgan inquired, "What secrets lie hidden here?" "Multiple sets of prints faded with the passage of time," the expert replied. "Yet the intriguing part lies in their absence. The doorknob wiped clean, a pristine canvas inside and out. The window latches bore no trace of touch." Delving deeper, the investigators unearthed a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard near the closet, unveiling a waterproof case housing a flash drive and a key. The key led to a safe deposit box at Northern Trust Bank, revealing another flash drive and a trove of incriminating documents within. The papers unveiled a web of deceit, entwining Westridge Pharmaceuticals in illicit financial dealings with figures at Harriman and Associates. Digital archives whispered of manipulated data and the trials of Neuropax, Westridge's flagship drug. Recordings captured Elise's voice intertwined with that of Vincent Harriman, the firm's senior partner, in damning conversations. "These numbers must never see daylight," Harriman's voice echoed in the recordings. "The side effects plague nearly 40%, not the 4% we publicized. If this truth escapes, both firm and stock will crumble." "People are perishing," Elise's retort resonated in the recordings. "Seizures seized them as foretold by the original data." "This dialogue remains ours alone," Harriman's voice cut through. "Remember, what is spoken within these walls remains bound by our pact for everyone's preservation." Morgan reached out to pharmaceutical watchdogs, confirming the silent removal of Neuropax from the shelves following a spate of deaths mirroring Elise's concealed findings. Harriman's records faced scrutiny, revealing a damning trail leading to an industrial cleanup service at his retreat on the day of Elise's vanishing. Traces of her essence lingered there, microscopic yet damning in their revelation. The enigma of the locked room persisted until security footage glimpsed a figure akin to Harriman's stature arriving during a tempestuous night of Elise's disappearance. The visuals captured his entrance, but his exit remained veiled in obscurity, a shadow slipping through unseen crevices. Returning to the chamber with an engineer in tow, Morgan unearthed a concealed passageway within the closet, a clandestine route leading through subterranean tunnels beneath the neighborhood's aged facades. The passage had been sealed with care, camouflaged to blend seamlessly with the room's original structure. Vincent Harriman faced the wrath of justice in the midst of a boardroom conclave. Confronted with damning evidence, he clung to a facade of innocence, casting aspersions on Elise's mental stability and accusing her of concocting falsehoods to sully the firm that had overlooked her ascension. The jury's verdict spoke otherwise. Footage retrieved from Elise's covert camera, nestled within a bookend on her shelf, depicted Harriman's intrusion that fateful night. The recording faded to black as he approached her scribbling form, silencing her truth for eternity. Prosecutors wove a tale of a calculated murder, of a locked room concealing more than mere secrets. Harriman's conviction for first-degree murder echoed through the halls of justice, despite the absence of Elise's earthly remnants. The pharmaceutical overlords implicated in the charade faced their own trials, their sins laid bare in the harsh light of truth. At the sentencing's climax, Elise's mother stood before the court, her voice a whisper yet carrying the weight of 1,000 truths. My daughter's chamber remained untouched, a testament to the truths she sacrificed all to expose. She never truly departed that room, her quest for righteousness imprisoned within, awaiting a savior to unveil it. The new occupants shunned the dwelling, leaving it once more to the clutch of abandonment. The house stood as a relic of revelations unveiled yet not unforgotten. Locals skirted its perimeter under the cloak of night, tales of a spectral luminescence flickering in the upper casement, a chamber where a heroine waged her final battle against the shadows that sought to shroud their sins. Justice arrived for Elise Winters not in life's embrace, but in the legacy she wove from beyond the veil. The room she never truly departed became both her sepulchre and her testimonial, a witness to the unmasking of malevolence and the vindication of purity. Story 18. The tale began like any other in a quaint Victorian-era home, nestled in the quiet embrace of a sleepy town. Michael and Sarah Klein, the new owners, never anticipated the secrets lurking within the walls of their newfound abode. It all started innocently enough, with what appeared to be just peeling wallpaper in the master bedroom. A water stain had tainted the floral design, prompting the couple to investigate further. As they carefully peeled away the layers of time, a different narrative unfolded before their eyes. Beneath the surface, etched in ink, was a name repeated endlessly, Elena Winters. The same name, hauntingly scrawled in a frantic, uneven script, filled every inch of the wall. This mysterious moniker did not belong to any previous owner, nor did it appear in any official records. Intrigued and unsettled by this enigma, Michael and Sarah delved deeper into the history of their home. A simple online search led them to a chilling revelation, a missing persons case from decades past. The image of a woman, Elena Winters, bore an uncanny resemblance to the silver-streaked, dark-haired woman, Margaret Cavendish, who had sold them the house. The discovery of this inexplicable connection set off a chain of events that would unravel a long-buried mystery. Sarah's curiosity transformed into an unrelenting obsession as she traced back the steps of previous homeowners, unearthing peculiarities in Margaret Cavendish's abrupt departure after only 7 months of ownership. Their humble abode soon became a hub for a makeshift investigation, with evenings dedicated to piecing together the puzzle of Elena Winters and her eerie presence within the walls. A retired detective shed light on a cold case, recounting the baffling disappearance of Elena and the lack of closure surrounding the investigation. Forensic teams descended upon the home, turning it into an active crime scene. Layers of wallpaper were meticulously analyzed, revealing ink that dated back 30 years. Handwriting comparisons led to a startling revelation. The writing belonged to Elena Winters, but the fingerprints pointed to a different persona altogether, Rebecca Eldridge, a psychiatric patient with a history of mental instability. Further revelations emerged as Sarah stumbled upon a hidden space beneath the bedroom floorboards, uncovering a trove of identification cards bearing different names but the same haunting face. Margaret Cavendish, it seemed, was just another persona in a twisted web of identities spun by Rebecca Eldridge. The investigation took a chilling turn when DNA evidence linked Rebecca to Elena's remains buried beneath the garden. Rebecca, masquerading as Margaret, had constructed a complex facade to conceal her sinister past. The names scrawled on the wall served as a stark reminder of a fractured mind desperately clinging to reality. As the truth unraveled, Michael and Sarah stood witness to a saga of deception, betrayal, and tragedy. The once charming Victorian home now bore witness to a dark history, forever etched into its very foundation. The walls themselves whispered of a long-forgotten crime, a tale of lost identities and shattered lives. And so, as the moon cast its soft glow over the house, Michael and Sarah found solace in the closure brought to Aliner's family, even as their dream home became a haunting reminder of the shadows that lurk beneath the surface of even the most idyllic facades. In the stillness of the night, the house stood silent, its secrets buried within the walls, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to peel back the layers of time. Story 19. The gentle current whispered secrets as it flowed that tranquil morning, the water reflecting the stillness of the world above. The fisherman's boat drifted lazily, almost lulled to sleep by the glassy, undisturbed surface of the river. It was then, in that quiet moment, that something caught his eye: a lone suitcase, bobbing near the shore like a forgotten relic of a bygone era. At first glance, the fisherman thought little of it, assuming it was merely discarded trash left to drift with the current. But as he approached, the air around him thickened with a cloying scent, heavy and unmistakable. The suitcase, wrapped in chains and weathered by time, held secrets far darker than old clothes or forgotten belongings. Authorities arrived, their faces grim as they pried open the rusted edges of the case. And there, amidst the shadows of the past, they found not fabric or trinkets, but a haunting sight: a tangle of hair, fingers frozen in a silent plea. And at the bottom, a chilling note whispered, "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the scene, her steps careful, her gaze steady. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s, lay still upon the shore, her dark hair now kissed by the waters, her pale skin a canvas of stories untold. The medical examiner worked methodically, each movement deliberate, each detail captured in silent reverence. But it was not the method of disposal that troubled Mercer the most. No, it was the eerie care taken in presenting the victim an unsettling display of perfection in the midst of tragedy. Nails manicured, hair styled, expensive clothing adorning her form. She wasn't just disposed of, Mercer murmured, her eyes tracing the ripples on the water's edge. She was prepared, adorned. The victim was known as Catherine Walsh, a real estate agent of repute, a solitary figure in the world of luxury properties. Divorced, childless, a ghost in an upscale neighborhood where privacy was a precious commodity. Colleagues spoke of her ambition, her meticulous nature, her guarded heart. She had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void of unanswered questions. As the investigation unfolded, Mercer delved into Walsh's meticulously kept life, a facade of perfection that hid darker truths. Her home, a sanctuary of order and precision, held secrets within its pristine walls. But it was in her office that the first crack appeared, a drawer slightly ajar, revealing a leather-bound journal that whispered of unseen terrors. The journal spoke of watching eyes, of lurking shadows, of a presence that haunted the edges of Walsh's existence. And as digital footprints led Mercer deeper into the darkness, a pattern emerged, a pattern of obsession, of fixation on a perfection that was but a fragile facade. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a pawnshop owner with a keen eye for detail. It was there that Walsh's missing emerald necklace resurfaced, a breadcrumb leading to a man named Michael Linden, a maintenance worker, unassuming, unnoticed by those around him. But behind his quiet facade lay a labyrinth of darkness, a twisted shrine to perfection. Surveillance footage painted a haunting portrait of Linden's obsession, his quiet visits to Walsh's world, his silent observations of her daily routines. And within the walls of his modest abode, investigators uncovered a gallery of horror's photos of women, each a mirror of the other, each a victim of his unyielding gaze. In the interrogation room, Linden sat unmoved, his gaze distant, his voice devoid of emotion. He spoke of imperfections, of lies masked as perfection, of a need to correct the flaws he saw in others. And as the truth unfurled, so did the depths of his depravity, the chilling precision of his actions laid bare for all to see. The trial brought closure, a semblance of justice in a world tainted by darkness. Lyndon's sentence echoed through the courtroom, a final chapter in a tale of horror and obsession. But for Mercer, the questions lingered, haunting her in the silence of the night. What drove a man to such depths of madness? What hidden imperfections tormented his soul, driving him to seek perfection in the most twisted of ways? The river continued its endless journey, its waters carrying secrets untold, memories fading into the embrace of time. And as Mercer sat at her desk, the notebooks of the victims before her, she knew that beneath the veneer of normalcy, beneath the facade of perfection, lay a darkness that could not be ignored. For in the quietest of moments, in the stillness of the night, the shadows of the past whispered their tales, reminding her that sometimes the most dangerous predators are those who walk among us, their secrets hidden, their sins waiting to be revealed. Story 20. In the quiet of her home, a mysterious key arrived, nestled within a plain envelope devoid of any sender's identity. The brass key, weathered by time's touch, seemed out of place yet strangely familiar to the homeowner. As she tested it in every lock she possessed, each one remained unmoved. It did not belong to her. Placing it gently on the coffee table, a haunting echo resonated through the hallway as the old grandfather clock, silent for years, emitted a solitary, hollow chime. Sarah Miller, unsettled by the inexplicable event, alerted the authorities upon discovering the enigmatic key. What began as a peculiar incident soon unfurled into a chilling criminal inquiry that sent ripples of unease through the tranquil suburban neighborhood. The initial responding officer brushed off her concerns, attributing the key's arrival to a possible mistake. However, Sarah's intuition whispered of something amiss, prompting the officer to reluctantly accept the key as evidence, placing it within a small evidence bag that would later become pivotal in a sprawling investigation. At the break of day, Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator from the Special Victims Unit, was handed the case file. With a keen intuition honed by years of experience, he sensed that this seemingly unremarkable brass key held a deeper, unsettling significance. Background checks on Sarah revealed a life devoid of criminal entanglements, a retired high school English teacher, widowed, with grown children dispersed across the country. No red flags in financial records, phone logs, or social media activity. She appeared to be just as she professed, an innocent bystander caught in a web of mystery. Forensic examinations unveiled only Sarah's fingerprints on the key. The nondescript envelope divulged nothing beyond a standard postmark from a regional distribution center. No DNA traces, no tangible evidence. The key itself, a commonplace schlage, showed signs of wear, hinting at years of use. A breakthrough emerged when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department's database. An archived cold case from 7 years past bore an identical key pattern, tied to a storage unit where grisly remnants of violence had been uncovered, blood-stained carpet, cutting tools, and haunting photographs of unknown women. The original investigation had hit a dead end due to insufficient evidence to unmask a suspect. Harmon delved into the dusty case files, discovering the retired detective who had previously worked the case. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash, with surveillance footage long erased. Partial DNA samples and unidentified women in the photographs painted a grim picture of unsolved mysteries. 3 out of the 5 women remained nameless, reported missing but never found, their cases lingering as suspected homicides without closure. Sarah, when shown the photographs, failed to recognize any of the women. As the investigation deepened, she fortified her home with new locks and a security system, haunted by the looming question, why had this key found its way to her? Harmon ordered a fresh analysis of the old evidence using modern techniques, which led to the expansion of the partial DNA sample and its comparison with genealogical databases. A distant familial match emerged, a second cousin twice removed from the elusive suspect, Harold Jenkins. Tracing back through familial connections, investigators zeroed in on Jenkins, a former neighbor of Sarah's who had relocated years ago. Employment records depicted a sporadic work history, unexplained absences, and frequent moves. A substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah once taught, Jenkins remained a mysterious figure with minimal documented interactions. His residence bore no telltale signs upon initial inspection, with neighbors painting a portrait of a reclusive, unassuming man blending seamlessly with the backdrop of ordinary life. The looming question persisted: why had the key been sent to Sarah now, after all these years? Harmon speculated on twisted motives: a trophy, a foreboding omen, or a chilling invitation lurking beneath the surface. The hunt for Jenkins intensified, revealing a man who had purposely erased his digital footprint, leaving no traces for investigators to follow. The grim reality of the case unfurled as authorities delved into a secluded cabin registered under Jenkins' deceased mother. Beneath the creaking floorboards, a hidden room emerged, accessible only through a concealed trapdoor. Neatly arranged shelves held rows of brass keys, each bearing a name and date on a small tag. 5 keys matched the women from the photographs, while the remaining 27 keys hinted at a broader, unspeakable truth: additional victims unknown to the law. A grim discovery behind the cabin unveiled human remains, prompting a protracted excavation that unearthed multiple bodies in varying stages of decay. Under constant watch, Sarah became a central figure in the nationwide manhunt for Jenkins, who had meticulously orchestrated a reign of terror unbeknownst to those around him. Behavioral analysts posited that the key symbolized a twisted gesture of recognition, with Jenkins singling out Sarah to appreciate his heinous acts. Dubbed the Keymaster by the media, Jenkins evoked fear and disbelief as his dark deeds came to light, shattering the illusion of safety within the community. Tracking dogs followed a scent trail from the cabin into the rugged wilderness, while search teams scoured dense forests and aerial drones scanned unreachable terrain. A chance encounter by a wildlife photographer captured a fleeting image of Jenkins, propelling authorities to close in on the elusive figure. Cornered in an abandoned fire tower, Jenkins, rather than surrendering, chose a final, desperate act, taking his own life before the looming justice could reach him. Beside his lifeless form lay a journal chronicling his atrocities, coupled with a single brass key mirroring the one Sarah had received. Within a waterproof container lay a trove of evidence, including maps marking burial sites, photographs, and personal effects belonging to his victims, a meticulous catalog of unspeakable horrors spanning nearly a decade. The journal's closing words addressed Sarah directly, a chilling testament to the darkness that had shadowed her ordinary existence. The subsequent investigation unraveled a tapestry of 32 victims, their families finally receiving answers after years of agonizing uncertainty. Sarah, unable to bear the weight of the tragedy that had brushed so close to her life, never returned to her once serene abode. The grandfather clock, once a harbinger of ominous chimes, was revealed to harbor a hidden wireless receiver, a tool through which Jenkins had observed, waiting for the perfect moment to deliver his haunting gift. The case stands as a stark reminder of the malevolent forces that can lurk behind unassuming façades, prompting psychologists to delve into Jenkins' writings in a quest to identify early warning signs of similar predators. And amid the silent corridors of an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys stands as a somber testament to lives cut short, each key unlocking not a door, but a harrowing truth about the darkness that can fester unseen, waiting to be unveiled. Story 21, the wooden plank shifted under her weight, catching Sarah's attention as she explored her new home. Crouching down, she traced the edges of the loose board, sensing a hidden secret beneath the supposedly solid floor. With cautious hands, she lifted the boards, unveiling a dark, narrow space underneath the house. At first glance, she saw only dust and cobwebs, but as her eyes adjusted, shapes emerged from the shadows: a mattress, a chair, and a tattered notebook filled with her name written repeatedly. Detective Morgan Reed stood beside Sarah, observing the scene beneath the floorboards. The fear in Sarah's eyes went beyond mere surprise. It hinted at a deeper violation, an intrusion of darkness into what was meant to be a fresh start. "Don't touch anything else." Detective Reed's voice was steady yet commanding as she turned on her flashlight, casting light on the hidden space. The walls were plastered with surveillance photos of Sarah, captured moments of her daily life, unknowingly watched and documented. Sarah had bought the cottage from the estate of Walter Green, an elderly man who had passed away with no known relatives. The property had sat empty for months before Sarah's purchase, with no hint of the chilling secret lurking beneath the floorboards. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah murmured. "I thought that basement access was sealed off ages ago. The inspection report never mentioned this." Crime scene investigators arrived, their equipment echoing against the wooden floors as they entered the concealed chamber. They meticulously documented the evidence, eventually retrieving the mattress, chair, and notebook from the hidden space. Forensic analysis revealed Walter Green's fingerprints scattered throughout, painting a haunting picture of his fixation on Sarah. The timeline pieced together by investigators was unsettling. Walter had been observing Sarah for years before his death, blending into her world without her ever noticing. The psychologist briefed the team, explaining how such obsessions often escalate from fantasy to dangerous reality. The hidden room hinted at sinister intentions that never came to fruition. Detective Reed's investigation took a chilling turn when she spoke to Walter's former co-worker, who nervously revealed Walter's fixation on Sarah and his belief that she belonged with him. A key found in Walter's workplace locker led them to a storage unit filled with replicas of Sarah's old apartment, complete with a mannequin bearing her likeness. Walter's troubled past emerged a history of erotomania that resurfaced in his fixation on Sarah. The investigation revealed a disturbing plan to be together with her, a delusion that consumed him until his sudden death. Sarah, overwhelmed by the invasion of her privacy, chose to sell the house and start anew, haunted by what could have been if she hadn't discovered the hidden chamber. The case closed with Walter's death, labeled as stalking with intent to abduct, a chilling reminder of the dangers that exist unseen. Sarah moved away, cautious and vigilant, while the cottage found new owners who remained unaware of its dark history. Life moved on, but for those who knew the truth, the memory of the room beneath the floorboards lingered, a tale of unseen threats, of monsters thwarted, and of a victim who narrowly escaped her fate. Story 22. Renovations always bring forth mysterious discoveries. Old newspapers, forgotten photographs, broken trinkets, all revealing fragments of the past. But when Sarah and Michael lifted the floorboards of their newly acquired Victorian-era home, they stumbled upon a folded letter hidden beneath the wood, its paper fragile, its ink faded. The message, however, remained stark: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could process the unsettling find, The quiet of the empty house was shattered by 3 sharp raps that reverberated through the air, sending shivers down their spines. Intrigued and unnerved, Sarah and Michael had been drawn to the house's rich history and intricate details when they purchased it at an estate auction. Little did they know that their renovation project would unravel a haunting mystery. Detective Alina Reed arrived at the scene with her partner, the exposed floorboards revealing a dark void beneath. With hands weathered by years of investigating, she delicately retrieved the note, already tainted by the couple's touch of contamination that couldn't be undone. As Sarah and Michael recounted the chilling sound of knocking, Reed scrutinized their expressions, detecting genuine fear. Background checks on the couple yielded nothing suspicious. Newlyweds with solid credit and stable jobs, they seemed ordinary, but the house harbored a more intricate past. Previously owned by the Hargrove family for generations, it had stood empty for 2 years after the passing of its last inhabitant, Margaret Hargrove, a reclusive widow with no known enemies or suspicious circumstances surrounding her death. Forensic analysis dated the cryptic note back approximately 20 years. The distressed handwriting hinted at fear and urgency, suggesting a troubled past. Margaret would have been in her 60s at the time, living with her late husband, Franklin, whose woodworking legacy still lingered in the house. Franklin, a respected retired teacher, had shown signs of paranoia in his final years, claiming someone was watching him. The breakthrough came during Reed's investigation when she spoke to Margaret's sister, now residing in a nursing home. In hushed tones, the sister revealed Margaret's fear of the collector, a man who came knocking 3 times, a creditor linked to Franklin's gambling debts. Margaret had wanted to sell the house to settle the debt, but Franklin had refused. The collector, identified as Victor Mercer, had vanished 2 decades ago, leaving no trace. Returning to the house with a forensic team, Reed led a thorough search, uncovering a chilling truth buried beneath the foundation, a male skeleton wrapped in plastic, identified as Victor Mercer. His skull bore multiple fractures, a grim testament to a violent end. Further exploration revealed a wallet with Mercer's ID, confirming his nefarious past as a loan shark and collector for an illegal gambling operation. As Reed pieced together the puzzle through forensic evidence and Margaret's diaries, a harrowing tale emerged. Franklin, driven to desperation by mounting debts and threats against Margaret, had turned to violence. The crawl space had become a clandestine grave, the tools of Franklin's workshop turned into deadly weapons. Margaret, out of fear and love, had aided in the cover-up, haunted by the echoes of 3 ominous knocks. With justice belatedly served, Mercer's remains were returned to his family, and Sarah and Michael, unable to bear the weight of the house's dark history, sold the property. Left vacant, the house stood frozen in time, its renovations abandoned. Local whispers spoke of eerie occurrences, a spectral knocking in the dead of night, a chilling reminder of the past. The note, a chilling artifact now stored as evidence, bore a cryptic warning: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Margaret's cryptic diary entries hinted at a paranoia that consumed her, suggesting that the truth may never be fully unraveled. Detective Reed reflected on the case, recognizing that some mysteries linger beyond closure, leaving behind unanswered questions and restless spirits. Story 23. The village always hushed about the dwelling at the edge of the woods. It stood solitary, windows veiled in darkness, its porch weary from the weight of time. No one laid claim to it. No one recalled who raised its walls. Yet when a band of wanderers strayed too near, they stumbled upon an enigma names etched into the wooden planks, carved deep as omens. At the base of the list, untouched by weathering, was a name unfamiliar to all, until one voice quivered, whispering, "That name belongs to me." A call pierced the night, logged by dispatch as a routine trespassing incident. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the lead adventurer who uncovered his name chiseled into the forsaken abode. The responding officers anticipated mere mischief, perhaps a jest among companions, but what awaited them defied all reasoning. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as twilight blanketed the forest. Her flashlight's beam sliced through the darkness, revealing the aged front of the building. The names 27 in total descended vertically down the eastern wall. Some had faded with age, barely discernible against the worn wood. Others remained sharp, as if carved just moments ago. And at the bottom, Mason Wright, the carving still tinged with fresh sawdust. "I have never set foot here before," Mason asserted, his words materializing in icy puffs. "I cannot fathom how my name came to be known." The inquiry commenced with background checks on each listed name. The findings sent shivers through the detective team. Every name belonged to a soul reported missing over the past 4 decades. Some cases had grown cold, others lingered open. Yet all shared a chilling commonality: the individuals vanished while trekking solo. Forensic experts photographed each engraving, cataloging the depths, methods, and aging patterns. The earliest name, Rebecca Hansen, aligned with a missing persons file from 37 years prior. Records chronicled a young woman who ventured into these very woods, never to return. Search parties unearthed naught but a lone hiking boot beside a babbling stream. Detective Keller delved deep into Mason's tale. His narrative remained unwavering. He bore no ties to the locale beyond this hike with 4 college companions. Their trail selection was arbitrary, guided by an online suggestion. Nothing in his past linked him to any other names adorning the wall. The scrutiny shifted towards Mason's comrades. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, furnished snapshots taken during their journey. Upon scrutiny, analysts spotted something unsettling: a blurred figure lurking in the backdrop of 3 separate images. A looming, slender silhouette, perpetually obscured by foliage. "We encountered no one else on our route," Emily affirmed. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller sanctioned a sweep of the house's interior. The edifice appeared deserted, dust cloaked every nook, furniture lay shattered and strewn. Yet in the cellar, officers unearthed a disquieting tableau. Personal effects belonging to the vanished hikers were methodically arrayed on wooden shelves: timepieces, rucksacks, cameras, billfolds, each tagged with a name corresponding to those on the exterior wall. Technicians meticulously documented every item. Under UV light, bloodstains materialized on the concrete floor, erasures someone had endeavored to efface. Subterranean scans unveiled no bodies interred beneath the house, yet cadaver dogs signaled persistently near the thickest part of the woodland behind the property. As the probe escalated, Detective Keller observed peculiar behavior from Mason Wright. He recounted eerie episodes, whispers at his threshold, fresh footprints leading to his door but vanishing on the return, specters observing from the street. The department assigned an officer for his protection, yet Mason's paranoia burgeoned. The breakthrough arrived with the unearthing of land records in county archives. The dwelling had been owned by a recluse named Victor Blackwood, a hunter who vanished without a trace 15 years prior, his disappearance uninvestigated. Detective Keller obtained a warrant to scour the surrounding forest. The search party unearthed primitive blinds strategically stationed along frequented trails. Within one, they stumbled upon a journal brimming with meticulous notes, observations of hikers, their paths, gear, and behaviors. The script mirrored samples from Blackwood's scant documents. The entries grew increasingly macabre. Initial pages delineated hunting tactics for animals, while later passages depicted humans as quarry their routines, frailties and strategies for acquisition. The final entries detailed stalking each victim on the wall, complete with elaborate narratives on target selection. A manhunt for Blackwood mobilized across jurisdictions. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned the woodlands. Tactical units combed every cavern and ravine, yet the quarry eluded capture. Mason Wright ceased answering calls. Officers dispatched to his residence found an unlocked door and vacant rooms. On his chamber wall, freshly carved, read a solitary line, "The hunter becomes the hunted." The pursuit of Mason spanned weeks with no breakthrough. Then, during a secondary sweep of Blackwood's dwelling, forensic specialists unearthed a harrowing find. Concealed behind a false partition in the basement, they discovered a small workshop housing woodworking tools, jars of wood preservatives, and a freshly carved plaque bearing a new name yet to be affixed to the exterior. Detective Keller recognized the name instantly. It belonged to the chief forensic analyst who had processed the house during the initial investigation. The analyst had called in ill that morn and was unreachable by phone. Authorities erected a surveillance cordon around the dwelling. Cameras documented every approach. Motion sensors monitored for intrusions. The snare was set. 3 nights later, sensors sounded an alarm. Surveillance footage captured a figure advancing from the forest, unfathomably tall and gaunt, moving with uncanny fluidity. As tactical squads closed in, the cameras briefly lost feed. Upon restoration, the figure had vanished. The house remains under constant watch to this day. Mason Wright and the analyst were never recovered. The inquiry persists, with fresh resources allocated as akin disappearances surface in other wooded realms. The names on the wall have morphed into legend among law enforcers. Some shun utterance of them. Others steer clear of the case entirely. And local trekkers steer wide of the dwelling, fearful that even whispering of it may append their names to that dread register the names no tongue dares speak. Story 24, The Realtor's Secret. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints held no clues to its existence. Yet when the family peeled back the old carpet, they uncovered a hidden door. A door with a heavy, rusted handle that required 3 of them to open. As the door creaked ajar, a wave of stale air, thick with the scent of damp earth, greeted them. Steps descended into darkness, beckoning them to explore. Expecting to find a simple storage space, they were instead met with an eerie sight. In the dim light, a single bulb swayed above a solitary chair, and on the wall behind it, a chilling display, a row of photographs depicting moments from their own lives, images captured from within the walls of their own home. The Mercer family had embraced the charm of the suburban property, with its weathered siding and creaking floors, unaware of the dark secrets that lay hidden within. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene, her partner by her side, the crime scene unit already at work. Yellow tape fluttered around the perimeter, sealing off the mysterious basement. Mrs. Mercer's voice trembled as she recounted the discovery below their living room floor. Connors wasted no time, instructing her team to document every detail before proceeding further. Gloved hands worked swiftly, cameras flashing to capture the unsettling scene. The basement was compact, akin to a standard bedroom, with cold concrete walls and a chair bolted to the floor. Above, the stark bulb cast eerie shadows, while the wall of photographs told a haunting story of intrusion and surveillance. Investigations revealed a puzzling lack of forced entry or theft. The basement seemed to have served as a clandestine observation post, with fingerprints of past property owners scattered throughout. Each family before the Mercers had lived in ignorance of the hidden chamber. As they delved deeper, anomalies in the property's history emerged. blueprints altered, permits withdrawn, records redacted. The truth unraveled when they spoke to the contractor who had renovated the house years prior. His denial of the basement's existence only deepened the mystery. Digital forensics unveiled a disturbing trove of images and audio recordings, capturing intimate moments of multiple families over the years. The perpetrator's meticulous observations hinted at a deranged mind fixated on those who dwelled within the house. A hidden passage led to a monitoring station, revealing a chilling workspace complete with a journal detailing the lives of each family. The journal's author, Edward Kelvin, the house's original builder, had vanished without a trace during construction. Kelvin's descent into madness was evident in his final entries, hinting at a sinister plan for the next unsuspecting family. The manhunt led to his discovery, curled within hidden crawl spaces, a ghostly figure haunting the very walls he had constructed. During interrogation, Kelvin spoke of the families as mere players in his twisted drama, believing himself to be the rightful guardian of the house. His delusions painted a picture of possession and control, his victims unknowing participants in his voyeuristic obsession. The Mercer family, like those before them, fled the property, leaving behind a house tainted by the echoes of Kelvin's surveillance. The trial exposed the elaborate network of hidden spaces and observation points that Kelvin had meticulously designed. As the house was razed to the ground, the families left behind carried the burden of unknowing violation, haunted by the realization that their most intimate moments had been watched, recorded, and stored within the walls they once trusted. In moments of stillness, they found themselves questioning the empty corners of their new homes, wondering if they were truly alone or if the specter of Edward Kelvin still lingered, a silent observer in the shadows of their past. Story 25. The mysterious package arrived without a return label or tracking number, just a damp cardboard box glistening in the morning dew. It wasn't intended for her. Sarah Miller's address was correct, but the name inscribed was unfamiliar. She hesitated, the rational part of her urging to leave it untouched on the porch. Yet a whisper of curiosity tugged at her, compelling her to unravel the mystery within. With gentle fingers, she peeled back the tape, expecting mundane contents like books or clothes. However, what lay inside was far from ordinary, a solitary VHS tape accompanied by a sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic cassette in her hands, feeling an inexplicable weight to it, as if it carried the burden of secrets untold. Tracing the worn edges with her fingertips, she noted the imperfections on the plastic casing, evidence of its journey to her doorstep. The note, with its urgent handwriting, hinted at a hidden urgency, a plea for attention amidst the backdrop of suburban tranquility, distant barks of a dog, laughter of playing children, and the steady hum of a lawnmower. Bringing the package inside, Sarah placed it on her kitchen counter, her mind wrestling with conflicting emotions. The name Daniel Whitaker meant nothing to her in her 4 years of residency in the house. The previous occupants, the Johnsons, had long moved away to be closer to family. Yet an unexplainable pull drew her gaze to the VCR, a relic of nostalgia gathering dust. The tape beckoned, an enigmatic enigma cocooned in faded black plastic. Against her better judgment, Sarah inserted the tape into the machine. Static flickered on the screen, gradually sharpening into focus to reveal a dimly lit room cast in shadows by a lone lamp. The camera angle was askew, portraying a sense of urgency. A man sat in a wooden chair, initially obscured by darkness. "My name is Daniel Whitaker." His voice resonated quietly but steadily. If you're watching this, someone found you, which means they'll find me too. As Daniel leaned closer, his weary features came into view, eyes burdened with sleepless nights, scruffy stubble adorning his face and disheveled hair. I didn't kill her, I need you to know that, but they found my fingerprints, my DNA, even though I never touched her. The camera trembled as he adjusted it, revealing a stark room with minimal furnishings, a temporary sanctuary for a man on the run. They planted everything. The police report will say I knew her, that we argued, that witnesses heard us fighting. None of it's true. I never met Catherine Walsh until I saw her face on the news. Detective Eliza Ramirez studied the identical VHS tape on her desk, the fifth one to surface, each bearing the desperate message of Daniel Whitaker, the prime suspect in the murder of Catherine Walsh, a man who had vanished without a trace upon the discovery of her lifeless body. The case seemed straightforward. Initially, a young professional woman strangled in her own home, with all evidence pointing to Whitaker. But the arrival of the tapes unveiled a tangled web of deception and intrigue. Ramirez, as she delved deeper into the investigation, unearthed Catherine's involvement in blowing the whistle on PharmaCorp, a pharmaceutical giant entangled in a web of deceit. Documents revealed cover-ups of severe side effects in a new drug on the brink of release. Catherine's impending testimony threatened to expose the truth, setting off a chain of events that led to her demise. The detective noticed discrepancies in the evidence, witness statements that seemed rehearsed, and security footage conveniently corrupted. Sarah Miller received a second package containing damning evidence against PharmaCorp, validating Catherine's claims. As Ramirez connected the dots with other recipients of the tapes, the truth began to unravel. Whitaker's breadcrumbs led to a storage unit where his journal chronicled the conspiracy, Catherine's incriminating files, and a detailed plan to frame him. The head of security at PharmaCorp confessed, implicating higher-ups in the cover-up. Justice prevailed through the unyielding pursuit of truth, leading to the downfall of corrupt executives and the redemption of an innocent man. Sarah met Whitaker, questioning the serendipity of her involvement in the unfolding saga. His tired gaze met hers, revealing the calculated randomness of the package's delivery. In a moment of reflection, they acknowledged the thin line between manufactured truth and justice, finding solace in the unexpected convergence of their paths. The VHS tapes, now relics of a bygone mystery, stood as a testament to the enigmatic nature of truth, awaiting those brave enough to uncover the secrets hidden within unfamiliar packages. Story 26, The Enigmatic Manor. The new inhabitants of the old Victorian manor brushed off the crackling of the intercom system as a mere anomaly. A relic of the past, once rewired but now forgotten, it whispered late into the night. One evening, curiosity got the best of the husband, and he pressed the button. A faint whisper crackled through the speaker, sending shivers down his spine. "Why did you come back?" Startled, he recoiled, his hands trembling. His wife, observing from behind, softly uttered, "I never said that." Nestled amidst ancient oak trees, the Victorian manor exuded an aura of mystery, its worn exterior masking a modern interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker, enamored with history, had acquired the property at a surprisingly reasonable price, despite the real estate agent's uneasy demeanor during the showing. The vintage intercom system, linking all rooms, had been a selling point for the couple with a penchant for the past. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, her unmarked car cracking gravel as it pulled up. The call had hinted at a potential break-in, but there was an unspoken depth in the dispatcher's voice. Daniel Parker, tall and pale, welcomed her at the door. It all began with the intercom he shared, leading Detective Reeves through the grand foyer. Static at first, then whispers, and finally full sentences. My wife thought I was imagining things until she heard it too. In the living room, Meredith sat stiffly on an antique sofa, hands tightly gripping a steaming mug left untouched. "We found something hidden behind the wall," she disclosed abruptly. Daniel wanted to expand the kitchen pantry, and when he removed the drywall, her voice faltered. Concealed behind the wall, wrapped in decaying plastic, lay a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves, wearing gloves, delicately turned its brittle pages. The elegant yet frantic handwriting belonged to Alina, the presumed previous owner. The entries chronicled Alina's mounting suspicion that her husband Vincent planned to harm her. The last entry was 30 years old, Daniel explained. After that, silence. The previous owners mentioned purchasing it from an elderly man who relocated to a retirement community. Further investigation unearthed the past of Vincent and Alina Blackwood, the former owners of the house. Records indicated that Vincent had sold the property shortly after Alina's alleged departure, with no divorce filings, change of address, or financial transactions under Alina's name post the final journal entry date. As a team probed the property, ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies under the garden shed's concrete foundation. Upon breaking through the aged concrete, human remains were unveiled. Forensic analysis identified the skeleton as a woman in her 40s, bearing signs of head trauma. A gold wedding band with the inscription to Alina, "My eternal love," was found among the remains. The case against Vincent Blackwood swiftly developed. Now elderly and residing in a care facility, he comprehended the charges against him. His chilling response to the evidence sent a shiver down Detective Reeves' spine. "She wouldn't cease talking," Vincent stated calmly, his voice sending a chill. "Always prattling through that cursed intercom, monitoring me, interrogating me. I disconnected it, but she reconnected it herself, claiming she wanted to reach me any time in the house." His vacant gaze met theirs. "I craved solitude." During his admission, Vincent unveiled the elaborate fabrication of Alina abandoning him, even sending postcards to neighbors from various locations, penned in forged script. He had resided in the house for years, walking daily over the spot where his wife lay buried. The trial was swift, with Vincent pleading guilty to the murder. The judge emphasized the calculated nature of the crime and the decades of deceit that ensued. Daniel and Meredith eventually sold the house, unable to bear its dark past. Prior to departing, they held a memorial for Alina in the restored garden. The intercom system was removed during renovations by the subsequent owners. Workers reported hearing static and whispers during the removal, attributing it to interference from their tools. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file before it was archived. Shutting the manila folder, she pondered how the house itself seemed to transcend time to expose its secret. Vincent Blackwood had finally faced justice, all because Alina had found a way to make her voice heard. Local law enforcement dubbed the case the house that answered back. Occasionally, Detective Reeves passed by the property on her way home. She never halted, but she would slow down, window slightly ajar, listening for whispers carried by the wind. Story 27. The old Polaroid held secrets lost in time, memories frozen in a snapshot of a forgotten birthday. Among the smiling faces and flickering candles, a mystery lurked. Inheriting the box of faded photos, the daughter uncovered something unsettling. A figure lurking in the background of each image, growing closer with each passing photo. Not a part of the family, not a familiar face. Yet there he was, a shadowy presence inching his way into the frame. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the collection while sorting through her mother's attic after the funeral. A box labeled Memories revealed a treasure trove of family gatherings from her childhood. What should have brought comfort instead sparked a haunting discovery. The first photo showed him faintly, a silhouette on the periphery during her 7th birthday. By the next photo, he had crept inside, unnoticed by anyone in the room. And in the following images, he drew nearer, standing ominously behind family members, his presence eerie and inexplicable. Disturbed, Sarah reached out to her father, her voice trembling as she questioned the identity of the mysterious man in the background. His response was a sharp silence, followed by a shaken denial of any knowledge of the figure. Desperate for answers, she sent digital copies of the haunting photos, hoping for clarity. Her father's alarmed reaction only deepened the mystery, confirming that the stranger was indeed an intruder in their cherished family memories. Detective Marcus Reed, a weathered soul in a precinct shrouded by rain and shadows, listened attentively as Sarah laid out the disturbing evidence before him. Moving from photo to photo, his experienced gaze noted the progression of the unknown figure through the captured moments. Each image revealed the man's deliberate advance towards the unsuspecting children, his intentions veiled in shadow until the final photo, where he lurked directly behind Sarah's youthful self, a pale hand outstretched towards her. Speculations of the photographer's presence were dismissed as Sarah revealed that her mother had operated the camera, setting the timer before joining the group. With no recollection of the man and no recognition from any party attendee, the case took a chilling turn. Facial recognition technology failed to unveil his identity, as if he knew how to evade detection, how to remain a ghostly presence in the background of cherished memories. The investigation gained momentum when Sarah unearthed more photos from different family gatherings spanning years. The figure persisted, a silent observer in the shadows, his features gradually unveiled through digital enhancement. A scar, a ring, a reflection in a window, all pieces of a sinister puzzle falling into place. Dental records provided the breakthrough, linking the phantom figure to Robert Keller, a vanished maintenance worker suspected in long-cold child abduction cases. Keller's connection to the vacation property where Sarah's birthday unfolded shed light on a dark truth. His master keys to rental properties across the region, his sinister presence in the background of joyous occasions, all pointed to a hidden malevolence that had haunted families for decades. Excavations at Keller's former residence unearthed chilling evidence: a hair clip, a toy car, a bracelet, all belonging to missing children, including Sarah herself. Alone in her silent apartment, surrounded by the damning photos, Sarah grappled with the weight of the revelations. The detective's call confirming the identification of remains near a vacation property brought a bittersweet closure to families long haunted by unanswered questions. DNA had spoken, confirming the fate of one of the missing children, a grim resolution to a decades-old mystery. As Sarah gazed at the final birthday photo, the candles casting a warm glow on her family's faces, she saw him once more. The figure in the shadows, watching her younger self, a silent sentinel of darkness amidst the celebration. Justice had finally caught up with the hidden threat, the shadow in the family photos exposed for the malevolence he had wrought over the years. Gathering the photos, Sarah placed them back in the box, each image a testament to the unseen dangers that lurk beneath the surface of seemingly joyous occasions. The haunting truth that some shadows move undetected through life's celebrations, leaving behind only a faint trace of their sinister presence in the captured fragments of time.